I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Titusville for January 6th will come to order. The first thing on our business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Why don't we stand for pledge to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to deviate from the agenda just a little bit and respectfully suggest, in light of the events of today, that we have a moment of silent prayer, keeping in mind for our country, and just for a moment. The next item on the agenda is the roll call.
Chairman Severs?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Richardson?
Yes.
Secretary Spidell?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Here.
Member Murray?
Here.
Member Parrish?
Here.
Member Porter?
Here.
Alternate Member Riley?
Here.
Alternate Member Noel Copeland?
Here.
Prior to moving on to the approval of the minutes, obviously we do have a quorum. We have 7 regular members in attendance together with the 2 alternates. Pursuant to the bylaws, Article 7, Section 4, they provide prior to commencing with agenda items after a quorum has been established, the chair shall ask the Planning and Zoning Commission members to review the agenda items to ensure that they have no conflict of interest that would prevent them from participating and voting on any particular item. If a member does have a conflict of interest, the chair shall pick an alternate member to serve in that member's place regarding. So I need to ask, does any member of the commission have a conflict concerning any agenda item? I partly raised that because of an email I received from Mr. Tucker, who I believe is present, that said at the community meeting held on September 28th, 2020, a member of the PNC attended and advocated for the development. Since this is a quasi-judicial procedure, if that is true, and I don't know whether it's true or not, counsel, is that an issue or a problem?
There was a communication that was shared that I relayed back to another Planning and Zoning Commission member back in October. And prior to the item on Huntington Park being scheduled in November, the member and I had extensive discussions on the statute, Florida Statutes 286.012, as it provides a opportunity for an individual who may have developed an opinion outside of the quasi-judicial process to abstain from voting. That change in the law was established in 2014, and that law provides that the provision allows for a public officer to abstain when there is or appears to be a possible voting conflict in the interest of fostering transparency in government. At the end result of these conversations, the individual has indicated to me that there does not appear to be a voting conflict based on any ex parte communications. I will now defer to Member Murray to cure any defects in the ex parte communication process as outlined in Resolution 1997-24.
Okay, Member Murray.
I also received that communication on the initial communication.
I contacted our legal representative with the city to verify that I could attend the public meeting since it related to an area close to my neighborhood. I also explained that I had attended the initial public meeting in 2019 as a concerned neighbor at that time also. Our neighborhood community's entry point of Park Avenue is 1 mile from the entry point to the proposed development. Park Avenue is a common element between both areas. I was advised that I could attend. I asked if I should disclose that I belong to the P&Z. Based on my decision regarding my attendance, I made the decision to disclose that information for transparency. Since Ms. St. Ange was present and we've known each other since the initial public hearing and the subsequent tree ordinance work. As you will hear tonight, I still have some of my original concerns regarding this project. I also have concerns that have been mitigated with new designs. In addition, you'll hear tonight, I have new concerns. I look forward to hearing from all the parties and understanding their perspective. I look forward to staff and the developers' representatives in addressing this new plan. I have no relationship, nor does any member of my family, with Mr. Moya, the engineering firm, Holiday Homes, and I've had no contact with Mr. Moya outside of public meetings.
So as I understand it, you don't feel as though you would have a conflict on deliberation? Okay. Next, we now move to approval of the minutes. I'm going to take these one at a time. The December 2nd minutes, the regular meeting. Is there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I have one correction, Mr. Chairman. On page 6 of 8, where it says, Vice Chairman Richardson said there is also no mention of Blanton Park or the West Pocket Parks. That should be, in my old age, we called them Vest Pocket Parks, V-E-S-T. That's what I refer to, not West.
Okay. Any other additions and or corrections? Do we have a motion to approve with that one correction?
So moved.
Second?
A second.
We have a motion and second. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, say no. Okay, moving on to the December 2nd meeting as the special agenda item. Is there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Not seeing any, or is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a second. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. Passes. Finally, the December 16th minutes. Do we, any additions or corrections to those?
Well, in the last of the minutes, I asked that an agenda item be on the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, this one, to discuss how our recommendations are being presented at the City Council. And we didn't vote on it, but as I recall, Mr. Chairman, you said there's a consensus. It's not on this meeting's agenda. I brought it up to Peggy in late December. It's still not on the agenda.
Okay, I remember a number of people were shaking their head yes, so based upon that, I indicated yes, that there was consensus. So if we could add that. So any other additions or corrections? Do we have a motion to approve without one addition or correction?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no. It passes. Next is the quasi-judicial procedures, and I'm going to read those provisions. Since we do have, appears as if two quasi-judicial processes. Certain items, and we've identified item A and B under new business, that are public hearing. Individuals desiring to speak on those items must fill out an oath card. Sign the oath contained thereon. Those cards are located near the entrance to the council chambers or may be obtained from the recording secretary. Some items which will be identified by the chair, which I have just done, are quasi-judicial, and those individuals desiring to speak in favor will speak first, and those opposed second, and those with a public comment third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. Witnesses may be cross-examined by the applicant, commission members, staff, or other representative as authorized by the commission. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please provide the recording secretary. The quasi-judicial procedure will be conducted in accordance with Resolution Number 24-1997. Recording secretary of all persons wishing to speak signed an oath card.
I have
If
several.
they have not wishing to do so, must go ahead and submit a card at this time. Staff of all public hearing agenda items been properly advertised.
Yes.
As the commission members visited the site or spoke to any member of the public regarding a quasi-judicial item, and if meant that a member received an ex parte communication, the identity of the person with whom the communication took place and the subject of the communication must be disclosed, including opinions, facts discussed. Any written communication must be made a part of the record. Site visits must be disclosed. I would just simply disclose, we all received a number of emails. So we have those. Anyone else have anything they want to disclose? Remember, Murray, you've already disclosed.
I also have, which I'll enter into the record, an email from Ms. St. Ange dated November 9th, which I went ahead and it's in my email. I also made a copy for.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a conversation with Mr. Moya. It had nothing to do with this application. It dealt with the tree ordinance.
Okay, thank you. In legal counsel, I didn't ask you earlier to read the notice. Is there any provision you want to read on that?
Sure.
We ought to do that as well.
In order to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to comply with all local, state, federal laws and guidelines regarding social distancing rules, designated seating shall be provided for the public at the Planning and Zoning Commission and other city board meetings. Individual speakers shall, when directed to do so, be given the opportunity to speak on agenda items during the meeting in accordance with the City of Titusville policies and Resolution Number 36-2020. No tripods, easels, props, or other demonstrative aids shall be brought into the public meetings of the Planning and Zoning Commission and city boards. Speakers are permitted to have a sign with them during their designated speaking time, provided that the sign is held by the speaker and is to be removed at the conclusion of their speaking time. Speakers who appear in person will be subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19, and any persons exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19 will not be permitted to enter City Hall or public meetings of Planning and Zoning Commission and city boards. As an additional method for public participation, the public may submit written comments via email to planning@titusville.com or by regular mail to Planning and Zoning Commission's attention at City Hall, 555 South Washington Avenue, Titusville, Florida, 32796. Written comments must be received by 12 noon prior to the start of the meeting and include the sender's name, address, and the subject line must specify the agenda item being addressed. All comments will be disseminated to the Planning and Zoning Commission members and made a part of the public record prior to any action being taken. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath card contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedure adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. We have no consent agenda items, no old business. We have new business, item A, 9A, Huntington Park, staff.
Well, good evening, commission members. My name is Eddie Galindo. Since I'm not your usual board liaison, I'm one of the members of the planning staff. And I wanted to start by asking the chairman, with this item, Huntington Park, since it's two action items, but on the same discussion, would you prefer to keep them separate, or for the discussion purposes, have the same discussion at the same time and then act on them separately?
I have no problem with, since they overlap with one another, with discussing both items. As such, we will act upon them separately.
Okay, great. And I apologize, my microphone's over here, so if you need me to speak up, please let me know. I wanted to start tonight with a couple of corrections first, and then identify the public comments that were received. Then we'll go into the presentation and then have some questions and discussion afterwards. So the first correction is...
Let me just suggest up front, I had sent an email that I thought it's important that our emails, particularly since this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, be disclosed. Making sure, number one, that all commission members have a copy. Likewise, the applicant should have a copy. Are you the one prepared to say who we've received emails from, or?
Yes, sir.
Who could do that? Okay. And if any commission members didn't receive a copy, you need to let us know. Likewise, the applicant, since this is quasi-judicial, is entitled to a copy as well. And so I want to make sure we have a fair proceeding. Okay?
So the first correction is going to be on page 73 of the agenda, and it relates to the sketch plat item. If you notice under recommended action on page 73, there are 4 conditions that are listed. The applicant has since submitted a new cover sheet, which is available in your Agenda Star software on your laptops if you wanted to review it, but the sheet addresses the first 3 conditions. And so those are not proposed conditions any longer with that change. And then the 4th condition is stating that a new concurrency assessment will be required before preliminary plat is applied for, is approved. And then the second correction is going to be on page 30, and that relates to the transportation concurrency. On section 1A, the first subparagraph is transportation impact, and the first sentence is correct. It talks about the project having frontage along Park Avenue. That is correct, but the rest of the section talks about data that's pertinent to South Street. And the reason that South Street's data for traffic is used in this section and in the concurrency assessment or analysis is because there is no data currently for traffic trips on South Park Avenue. And instead, this is the nearest collector roadway that we have data for. When we'll get into this discussion a little bit later, but when the traffic study, which has been requested, will be conducted, that will provide the data along South Park Avenue. And so those numbers in this section are, again, related to South Street. So then I wanted to describe or list the people that had, the members of the public who had submitted public comment. We have Kay St. Ange, Matt Hayden, Laura Losi, Charles Tucker, David Botto, who retracted his statement subsequently, and Bruce Moya, who is the applicant. Is there anyone who did not receive, Peggy Busaka CC'd or BCC'd the members and the applicant? Is there anyone that did not receive that should have? Which member? Spidell. Which, I'm sorry, which member did you not receive emails from?
I've not received emails from anyone, just the agenda.
Okay.
There are 16 pages of emails located in Agenda Star that you have not reviewed that I believe everyone else has received. So if you would like time to review them, that now would be your time to review them. And I would also like to hear from the applicant, Mr. Moya, regarding his confirmation of receipt of these emails, please.
If you could.
It just needs to be on the record.
Just
And
needs
if you
to-
could press the button on the microphone so it captures your voice, please, so it's red, the silver, yeah.
Hi, yeah, Bruce Moy, the applicant. I have received all the email attachments you spoke of.
Thank you.
So while member Spidell is reading those, I will transition over to the PowerPoint presentation for tonight. The PDF version of the PowerPoint, oh, thank you. The PDF version of the PowerPoint is available in your Agenda Start packet as well if you wanted to follow along on your machine. If not, we'll start with the presentation. So this is rezoning number 2/2020, Huntington Park. It's a planned development that has, the applicant is requesting an amendment to the PD and master plan. Turn this on. Sorry, I'm not pointing at you guys. Okay, so what's currently at the site, it's a wooded site, 79-acre parcel that's zone PD, currently allows 110 residential units, and the request is to amend that to, and amend the PD ordinance and the master plan to reduce that number down to 86 units. If this request is approved, the zoning will remain PD. The change will be in the ordinance that's approved and the master plan. Sorry. So this is a comparison slide to show you what's currently approved for the site. On the left-hand side is the 110 units, and on the right is the 86. There's several stormwater ponds in both master plans. There's 2 access points. One is along South Park Avenue, and another is on the western edge in the current approved master plan. In the proposed master plan that's under consideration for tonight, there's only 1 access point, and it's along South Park Avenue. The master plan also, the proposed master plan for tonight also proposes several open space and recreation tracks. And if you're not familiar with the site where it's located west of Park Avenue, north of Country Club Drive. On the north side is the Park Avenue Baptist Church. The proposed use is 86 single-family units. It's an 86-unit single-family subdivision with open space and recreation. The minimum lot area for the homes, or for the lots, I'm sorry, is 5,000 square feet, and the minimum floor area is 1,400 square feet. And then this slide lists some of the changes that were proposed in the PD ordinance. It's a summary with references to the specific sections if you wanted to see the full text. The full text of the ordinance is available on page 42 of your agenda. But just to highlight, the first is reducing that number of units from 110 to 86, specifying the required amenities within those recreation tracts, changing the minimum lot width for the pie-shaped lots, ensuring pavement width compliance, ensuring the wildlife culvert beneath the roadway is provided, ensuring that utilities are placed underground, that a fence, lock, and screening is provided surrounding the lift station, specifying the buffer width and vegetation, and also removing the requirement for a wall or fence, and then finally providing open space and recreation. So that's the summary. I wanted to ask if the commission members had any questions to start us off, or if not, general discussion points.
Anyone on the commission have? Yes, Member Parrish.
My first question would be, apparently they've changed the access for this development from 2 points. One that was formerly, I'm not sure, is that the west, that they eliminated the west side access in favor of the single access on Park Avenue. What is the code provision or statute that mandates access through wetlands?
I don't think there's a specific section that talks about access through wetlands. There's access requirements in the technical manuals, and the code requires only one access point for this number of units. It's dependent on the number of units proposed in the subdivision. Again, with access relative to wetlands, I don't know that the code has touched on that.
So just let me make sure I understand. If they used the west access that they had originally planned, they could have accessed the western portion of the development, and then the east could have accessed the eastern portion of it.
That's correct. So if they
Okay, thanks.
May I? Member Grant. Member Murray, you first.
And just for clarification, we did chat about this briefly today in regard to the width of the road. And right now, the road, as documented, is 22 feet of pavement, 26 feet, including the gutters. And yes, I went out and measured my road today to figure out parking. Has anything changed from the time we talked in regard to, was that an error on the drawings, or are they going to ask for a waiver?
know that nothing has changed. I haven't spoken to the applicant since we spoke, but since they are here tonight, if you wanted to ask the question to them.
I think I'll wait until their presentation. I just wanted to double check with you on that.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I suppose I should wait and ask the applicant concerning the removal of the fence that supposedly was supposed to go around it. And maybe I can ask you then, this traffic study that's contemplated, any idea when that's going to happen?
So the traffic study would be required to be completed prior to approval of the next stage, which is the preliminary plat phase. The sketch plat is the stage where you kind of just look at the design, the pattern for the subdivision. The next stage is where the engineering happens, the stormwater calculations, really looking into the feasibility of the project and checking the numbers.
Okay. Let's bounce back to the road that's going across the wetlands, if you don't mind. I have a concern of the impact it's going to have on the wetlands. Could you, in your professional capacity, explain to me how that should not be a concern to me?
So the roadway connects with two wildlife culverts beneath it. And so if the concern is about water flow, water will be able to pass from one end of the wetland to the other. And it's also available for critters, for animals, to cross from one end to the other without causing habitat fragmentation. So it is, preferably there would be no crossing across a wetland. However, being able to maintain the connectivity of the hydrology and for the diversity of the animals, this is better than nothing.
And whose responsibility will it be to maintain this outlet or whatever, this passageway? Would that be the homeowners association or the city or whom?
Yes, sir, the homeowners association.
Okay. Well, that's all I have for now, but there'll be more, I'm sure.
Yes, Member Porter.
So a follow-up question to what Mr. Grant was talking about. So who's going to enforce the homeowners to keep this updated?
If they were not to maintain it, it would be a
Right.
violation of their site plan. And so we could use code enforcement as a tool to manage enforcement,
And what would that enforcement be?
ensuring that the water can flow through the culverts and that it's not overly vegetated. And so it would require an inspection. It would require citation, and then if it needs to go to code enforcement, the full process of code enforcement action, then it would happen. That's how it would happen.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
You have another one? Mr.
Yeah,
Grant?
I have another question concerning, we're backtracking again, but going back to the traffic, I believe you mentioned something about, well, I don't know what you mentioned. It was kind of confusing, but could you repeat what you said about the traffic earlier? Traffic pattern?
So in the report we address, we had a preliminary concurrency assessment done.
Right.
And there's no traffic data available currently that the city has for the road that fronts this property. So South Park Avenue, we don't have
Okay.
data for it. And what the city typically does is uses the nearest data point, which would be the nearest collector, in this case, South Street. So the data that's in this report it reflects the conditions on South Street, the segment of South Street that would be closest to that roadway. However, if this is approved tonight, the full traffic study collecting the data and analyzing the data for South Park Avenue we would not be able to move forward with the preliminary plat stage, which is that engineering next stage of the subdivision process, until we've received that traffic study.
South Street is at least 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles from that, isn't it? And so you can use South Street's data to, I don't see how you can do that.
We spoke with the city engineer about that, and basically, his explanation was that to do a concurrency assessment at this stage, it's just a preliminary assessment. So what he's looking at is the nearest traffic data points that we have. And the nearest traffic data that he had available to him was that segment of South Street to this project. So he's going to see what the potential impact would be based on this development there. And from that, he determined in the assessment that a traffic study is going to be necessary to really evaluate all the road segments and everything, and any potential need for improvements that would be required as part of this development. So what he was doing at this stage was just a preliminary assessment, and he's just using the best data that he has available to him at this point. Right now, that's only on South
So
Street.
these numbers we're looking at here about the maximum capacity that's South Street data, and
Correct. That was the correction Eddie was making at the beginning of the meeting.
that's curious because they talk about the current trips per day currently on Park Avenue as 18,950, and I'm expecting an additional 905. So that's where I'm.
Well, again, those numbers are not respective to Park Avenue.
It's Park Avenue.
It's South Street, right?
We shouldn't be there.
Okay, thank you. I had a couple of questions. That's all commission members, I believe, received a copy. I had submitted to staff some 15 questions, and all of us, 3 of them were responded to by staff. The remainder responded to by the applicant. I have a couple of questions. The first one deals with the conservation subdivision. Part of the reason why I asked that question is the way it's structured in the code, it's almost like a same section as PID, PD, et cetera. And I asked the question, is that a zoning district, or is there any special advertising requirements? And the answer was no. When I looked at the legal ad, there's nothing mentioned in the legal ad that this was going to be a conservation subdivision. There was mention in there that there is a master plan. In addition, one question that staff answered was, I asked in number 3, is the conservation subdivision permitted in PD? And if so, which regulations apply? And the response was per 33-108B of the code, permits a conservation subdivision design through the PD process. It really doesn't answer my other question, which was, which applies. For example, in the conservation subdivision regulations, it expressly says in 33-103D, minimum lot size, no minimum lot size shall be required. So I'm kind of at a loss. Which are the minimum regulations? Are they the master plan? Are they PD? Are they conservation? As such, and in this instance, we're applying for all three. It sounds like you're applying for PD amendment, you're applying for a master plan, and you're applying for a conservation subdivision. Is that correct? As
That's
I
correct.
understand it? Okay. I'm not familiar personally with the conservation subdivision because it wasn't on the books whenever I formally was here, so that's something apparently new. One of the questions I asked was, number 7, dry retention areas, are they planted with trees? The answer by the applicant was possibly. A landscape plan has not been prepared at this time. And also, item number 8, the compensatory storage area will be, that area be cleared and revegetated with vegetation and trees and possibly a landscape plan. I would just simply point out under the master plan section 6.1.8, it says the Planning and Zoning Commission and Council may require additional materials such as maps, plans, studies, reports, which may be needed in order to make necessary findings and determination the project is in compliance. But one of the things that is obviously evident, a lot of people concerned about the number of trees that are going to be lost by this project. I think it would be helpful if we knew the answer to those questions. For example, and I know it's not on the books today, but the compromise ordinance on the tree ordinance had specific guidelines as far as trees and planting for mitigation purposes. And I think that would be helpful if we knew that. That way we know trees, they may be trees that can be planted in water or subject to saturation a lot, et cetera, but at least we would know. Number 9, I did get the staff, the developers' comments. I said section 30-40 of the LDR requires the developer to work with staff to adjust proposed layout. And the answer from the applicant was this new layout is a direct result of meeting city code and staff comments to the code preserving trees. Are there specific examples where you said, yes, you have to adjust this lot or move a road or alignment because of the tree survey? I'm just talking about implementing the section of the code.
Yes, so let me find the, what page number the master plan is on so I can make sure everyone's looking at it with me.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm on page 50 of 96.
Okay.
Wait a few minutes just to make sure everyone's there with me. So towards the western edge of the development, not all the way to the west, but somewhat, there's a stormwater tract SW4. It's a dry retention pond that we had comments about the tree protections for the area around there, that if the stormwater, the grading required for that stormwater retention area had not been moved, we were worried that the trees there would have been negatively impacted, possibly killed. So that was one area, and then along the lots between 60 and 64, there was a tree close to the rear lot that I believe we made the comment that this would have also negatively impacted the tree, and asked that there be additional, that the grading plan be contoured around the tree to make sure that it would survive.
Okay. So your comment on that particular one was the grading issue, not necessarily adjusting the lot or the depth of the lot or things of that nature. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The next question I had was, is this site compatible with using LID techniques for retention? And if so, does the design include LID? And the applicant's response was no. Is this site subject? It seems to me this site would be one that would be capable of LID design. Have staff talked with the applicant about that?
So in developing the we haven't gone so far with the LID ordinance to where it's been adopted yet, but some of the BMPs, the best management practices that are proposed within that ordinance are some things that we see in this design. So I wanted to point those out. Specifically, protecting wetlands is considered an LID BMP, and this site preserves between 30 and 40 acres of wetlands. So that's a major bonus for the site. There's also preservation of open space, retaining tree canopy, which the site preserves over 4,000 inches of tree inches that are on the site, clustering the design, minimizing the building footprint, and then with regards to the roadway across the wetlands, staff asked the applicant to consider providing, when they develop their landscape plan, to provide trees along the roadway to act as what's called rainfall interceptor trees, which basically act as an umbrella to prevent more stormwater falling onto the road and becoming sheet flow. So there are some principles that are shown, that some LID principles and practices that are in this design. I don't know if when the applicant mentioned no, he had a certain LID BMP in mind, such as biogardens, bioswales, rain gardens, or rain barrels. Those are certainly not in this design, and so there are some LID components in this.
Also, I'd ask the question, if known, what is the flood elevation in this area for a 500-year storm event? Does staff know the answer to that question?
I do not.
Okay. And the reason why I ask that question is we already have complaints around this basin of high water. We have complaints, and I think the city needs to be very concerned about whether or not this will contribute to the problem. And I hear on the news, for whatever it's worth, well, that was a 500-year storm event that happened this year or last year. We had 3 occasions this last year in which we had 500-year storm events. So designing necessarily to a 100-year storm concerns me. And my final question I'd ask, if there was a blockage of the road at the wetlands and there was an emergency in the westerly portion of the subdivision, is there an alternative means of ingress and egress for those residents? And the answer was no. And part of the reasons why I think it was 2017, apparently, historically, for 20, 30 years, the threshold was 50 units, whether it was an apartment complex or and somehow in 2017, the city staff encouraged and got council to change the 50 to 100. And I can just foresee that as potential being a problem if there was a fire out there in the wetlands. How people on the west side of this are going to get out of there? And I think someone needs to look at that. So those were my initial questions. Thank you. Anyone else have any? Yes.
I just want to state for the record, I did not receive your email with a list of questions. What I received was a chopped up version of the answers.
Okay.
I had no idea that the email came from you.
Okay. Okay. No. Well, I've tried the policy of asking in advance, not to surprise staff any more than necessary, so to speak. So that's why I did that. And Mr. Parrish appreciates that.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Richardson, did you receive the full list of the questions from us with the answers? Because what Mr. Seaver sent to us was just directly to staff, and we disseminated the answers with those questions to everybody.
I didn't receive the entire list of questions.
I will see if I can, if it's not on the agenda star, I'll go ahead and add it in there if possible.
Did you receive this document?
No, not to my knowledge. I received portions of it, not the entire document. There was a response from the staff, there was a response from Mr. Moya answering these questions.
Member Murray, did you have another question?
Yes. Just for clarification, so we have 45-foot frontage on the pie for the cul-de-sacs. And so is it a correct assumption that they still meet the maximum 5,000 square feet?
Yes, actually, so since the lot width is measured from the front building face and the pie-shaped lots flare out, the pie-shaped lots are actually larger in area than the rectangular lots.
Thanks for, just for clarification. Now, on the recreation component of this, and meeting the service levels, we talk about 183.83 acres that we have in order to meet our service levels. Now, I'm really interested in whether or not anybody has broke that down to how much of that is on the river or lagoon front versus out in the area where I live and these residents live. And whether or not that information is available. From an equity component across those service levels, it seems like it's weighted towards the lagoon. So it's no different than using South Street for Park Avenue and some of those things. Is it really appropriate?
I can tell you that when we were working on the comp plan update, we had considered a policy to require a certain amount of park space within a quarter mile.
Correct.
And so that assessment is only looking at the total number of acres of recreational land, not its vicinity or proximity to the property. However, there are several recreation tracks incorporated in this development that will directly provide the recreation of these residents.
And my curiosity came from the fact that the future comp plan, not the existing, asked for the quarter mile measurement. And so again, just making sure that not only those, as we move forward, we have that consideration in place. Now, here's kind of a sticky one. Under rezoning section 1, number D, and it also relates back to in the criteria section 4, you're talking about the introduction of sewage during major storm events. Now, we've had quite an interesting sewage couple weeks here in town. And section 4 in criteria talks about the 6-inch cast iron pipe and so on and so forth. As we all know, infrastructure is aging all across this country. In the concurrencies and the surface levels, do we do any evaluation of what we're attaching to when it comes to these new projects? Sections of Park Avenue run through developments that are 40, 50 years old. So I'm assuming the infrastructure was there prior to it. And then again, that nice statement about introduction of sewage during a major flooding event. What is kind of is that normal? Or is this something specific to that property? Like I said, there's a lot of sensitivity right now to that matter.
What page is that statement on?
It's under rezoning section 1D. I'd have to go back and it's, I can find it here for you just a second. Got to look at all
I
my
think
little
I found it
tabs.
on page 31, if that's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Member Richardson, I did include the full answers to those questions from Chairman Severs in the Agenda Star, so if you haven't received those, you can open them there.
Gotcha. So it appears that there may have been a discharge at some point, that when the environmental assessment was conducted. I don't know the details of what evidence was found. Obviously, as soon as a sewage spill is occurring, it's noticed and we make the public aware. And to my knowledge, we have not had an issue in that area in the past several years.
And again, I'm just very curious, the statement is in here. It's come from potentially the environmental assessments. I think it's important to figure out what that really means. It's not a generalized statement that's kind of put out there as a worst-case scenario. So that is of concern for me, just so that you're aware of that. And then my other question had to do, again, with the transportation impact, which you've already discussed. So, thank you.
Member Grant?
I hate to keep beating a dead horse, but back to the traffic again, if you don't mind. 22-foot roads. Is there any concern that those narrow roads would impede emergency vehicles? But let's back up a second here. There would be no parking on the street, am I correct? As far as you know?
The code allows parking on the street for local roads.
I'm sorry, say again?
The code allows for parking on street on local roads.
22-foot wide roads.
The code requires 26-foot roads, and this is narrower at 22
What
foot.
I'm getting at is, would those narrow roads impede emergency vehicles if they had to come through there? With those people parking on the road?
It's a good question.
Well, that's why I ask it.
Of course. You know, if it were that two cars parked on opposite sides of the road in the same exact segment, it may make it very tight. What I can tell you is that the fire department reviewed the plan and had no comments.
Really? Gonna bulldoze and run out of the way, huh?
Member Grant, just so you know that there was an email that was sent to us that indicated that statement that's in the ordinance somehow granted that waiver to the minimum design requirements of a local road. And that's not the case. They'll still, when they come in through the site plan process, they'll still have to go through the process to grant any waivers to that design standard. And we'll have to justify it at that time. No, I think your concern is valid, so we could certainly refer to it if that request comes before us.
One of the things that bother me, especially in my own neighborhood, people park on the side of the roads and ambulances try to get through and after weave and all kind of stuff like that. And if it was a family member of mine who was impacted because of it, I'd be a little bit upset. That's why I ask. You know, I mean, I have wide roads in my neighborhood. I mean, there got to be 26 or more. But still, people park on their side by side, excuse me, and it impedes the flow of emergency vehicles when they have to respond. And I just think the narrow roads are an impediment. I really do. But that will come later. Yeah, I'll hush.
Okay, I think, Member Murray, one last question.
One last question, that's it.
Then we'll get to the public hearing.
Mr. Galindo, based on our conversation about road widths today and my discussion about in my prior residence, when roads did not meet the minimum requirements, that then required parking on one side only because of emergency vehicles. In many cases, it's odd and even, so on and so forth, for fairness. My question is that something, in order to be incorporated into a project like this, is that an ordinance and code change? Is that something that can be attached as a condition? What's the best way to handle that? Because I think it's a major concern.
Absolutely. So it's currently not in the code that there be required only parking on one side of the street. If you wanted to make it a condition, absolutely, you could do so.
Madam Secretary, how many cards do we have on this item?
6. I think I heard one of the alternate members trying to speak also.
Pardon?
I may have heard one of the alternate members trying to make a comment.
Okay. Certainly, go ahead.
Kathy Riley. I could ask the state, what does the city of Titusville master plan say about building a road over wetlands? And is there an alternative in this case?
So if you turn to page 31 of 96, it talks about the environmental impact of the project. And there's a reference to our conservation element of our comprehensive plan. It's strategy 1.6.2.1. Talks about avoiding damage to wetlands. So there's not a strategy or a policy that talks about building roads in wetlands, but we try to mitigate or minimize the damage to wetlands as much as possible.
In this particular plan, though, in this particular request, is there an alternative? Could the road be built in a different place?
I don't believe so. Based on looking at the master plan, it appears that this is the narrowest span between two portions of uplands. If you see otherwise, you can make that recommendation, but it appears that would be the shortest span between these upland areas.
If there were two entrances, though, to the plat, would that enable them to make a shorter road, or would that in any way help things with the wetlands?
Well, I know that the previously proposed access on the western edge is no longer feasible. The other subdivision to the west is under sketch plat review currently and does not provide for a cross access onto this property. If you were to provide access elsewhere, that may be possible, but I don't see it feasible given the surrounding properties. But I could be missing something. So if there's another place that you would propose access and create two distinct, non-connected kind of hubs of this subdivision, feel free to propose it.
Are there other places in Titusville where roads are built on wetlands?
I'm not familiar with any examples, are you?
If you're looking for something that's similar to this situation, we can't answer that for you right now without going back to look at our own records. But
I can give you an example of Harrison Street extension from Park Avenue to Fox Lake Road. That's an example. Singleton Avenue from South Street all the way over to Garden Street is an example.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments of staff at this time? Anything further from staff at this time? Otherwise, I'm going to open the public hearing. Open the public hearing for the applicant first.
Yes, hi. Good evening. Bruce Moyo, MBB Engineering. I'm the president of the engineering company. I'm the applicant of the project. We've been working on this project since 2017. We have been before this board numerous times, and we obtained approval of the original plan, master plan rezoning, for a conservation subdivision. If you recall, back in the day, when we first came to this board, this property was owned by the bank. It was a property that they got back in the recession, that they obviously, banks don't like having property on their roll, so they looked to entitle it and sell it. Well, they did that. They were successful. They sold it, and now it's owned by a home builder, Holiday Builders to be specific. Once it was sold to Holiday Builders, they retained us to go ahead and go to the next level, which was to do the sketch plat. And to do the sketch plat, we had to get a lot of information. We had to get a topo, we had to get tree surveys, we had to get borings, we had to get a lot of additional information that we didn't have when we got the original plan approved by the P&Z and the city council. So during this process, we found out a lot of stuff. We found out that we had a lot of trees. We found out we had a lot of flood zone. that was falling, elevation-wise, falling below the floodplain elevation. So in order to develop this property, in order to develop the minimum amount of uplands that are even available on this property, there was going to have to be some floodplain compensation. There was going to have to be, stormwater management that had to be done. So when we realized that we were limited even further than we thought, we initially had 110 lots. Once we believe that we've have a design that will actually work and meet the codes and actually can be constructed, we found out we can really only build 86 lots. I guess really without my purpose of knowledge, this project has a lot of LID elements to it. So I apologize for the quick no on the response, because it was more, I think, unintentional than it was. And specifically, one of them was being discussed about the roads. The roads were made narrow on purpose to reduce the amount of impervious area, to reduce the amount of development area, and therefore reduce the amount of stormwater retention required to treat the additional impervious surface. So that would be a very typical LID issue that would be proposed, narrower streets. So that was part of it. Also preservation, as you well know, we're preserving over 50% of the site in its natural state. We are impacting the wetlands as minimum as possible. We couldn't possibly minimize the impact any more than we have. That's why the crossing is where it is. It's in the narrowest part between the two uplands. We did remove the access to the west. That is private property. We can't propose access to private property. We can only propose access to public property. And because we fell below the threshold of the second driveway access, then we removed that secondary, possibly emergency access. The roadways, we believe, are designed significantly higher than the 100-year floodplain. And there will be, once we do the final engineering, we will ensure that that road doesn't flood during, the higher storm events. So we don't want our people to be trapped back there any more than you do. So we'll make sure that we won't have flooding problems, that we won't have access problems for our people to get to Park Avenue. So if you see the new layout, one thing you may notice, and one reason we're back here too, is that the surveyor that did the original boundary survey did it in error. He didn't get it right. He got the legal description was correct, so everything that was done was correct, but it was drawn incorrectly, and we actually have less land than we thought we had, but not by much, by a couple acres, I think. But even regardless of that, we're still proposing to preserve more uplands, pretty much the same amount of wetlands. We didn't really change the crossing at all. That's basically the same as it was approved previously. And we've reduced the lot count significantly. We really feel it's a much better layout. It's a lot less intensive because we've reduced the lot count by, almost 30 lots. We're saving as many trees as we possibly can. I think the only really other difference in the request is that before there was a wall being required on the north property line, but if you go out there, and since that request, we've been out there, there's a very heavily wooded buffer there now. And to take that out to put a wall in I think would be really not in concert with what you're trying to do. We don't want to remove trees to put in walls. I think and that's why we're proposing to not put the wall in, because we don't want to remove all those trees. I mean, we've got a buffer that's probably 30 feet high that you can't possibly see through. Why put in a 6-foot wall and take all that out? To us, it didn't make any sense. So we're proposing to remove that from the requirement. Obviously, we'll be doing all our studies, all our traffic studies as required by the city to meet all their standards. We'll be looking at intersections, road segments, whatever is required to make sure that we're not degrading the level of service. We'll be doing a full-blown, we've done basically a preliminary drainage study. We think we're good on the retention to meet the requirements. We'll be doing a full-blown drainage study when time comes, assuming we get approved here. And we're actually have bigger buffers than we had before. So I think it's an improvement over what was approved by council before. The only reason we're really here is because the layout changed. Staff believes it's significant enough to make us come back. Sometimes that's a judgment call. You know, we did reduce the amount of lots, we did increase the buffers, we did increase the preserved area, but because the layout is different, we did remove the second access. They wanted us to come back to you to get reapproved. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Anyone have any questions? Yes, Mr. Grant.
Sir, were you at the August 28th community meeting? You an engineer?
Yes, sir.
It was alleged that you called this property marginal. Could you explain that, marginal, if you said that?
Well, it's less than ideal. If it's got a lot of wetlands on it.
The reason why I asked is because there are some folks are concerned that, you know, with the bureaucracy and all that's involved in these type of projects, that you may throw up your hands, you know, quarter way through the project and leave a big old mess there.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a mess at all. I think it's going to be one of the most beautiful subdivisions in the city of Titusville because we're going to preserve over 50% of the existing property in its natural state. I don't think you have a project in the city that does that.
Okay, I was just conveying some concerns of some citizens.
I understand.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone have any questions?
I do.
Yes, Mr.
So, and it's a question on the trees, and I don't know if you can answer it, though. How many trees is on that property?
It's covered with trees, almost 100% coverage.
And, okay, so what's the percentage of removal from that property?
We're only removing trees in the developable uplands, which is all we're limited to develop. I mean, we can't really develop in the wetlands, so we're limited to how much uplands we have. And the amount of fill that we have to put in will basically limit us to not preserving any trees in the development area, but preserving all the trees that surround it.
So what's the percentage of tree removal?
I guess that would be the limits of the development area, which is about 20%. There's a table on your city that has development area. Well, I guess I'd have to apologize because we'd have to also look at the stormwater. So it's probably about 30, maybe 33%.
And on the original plan, what was the amount of trees being removed there? How many trees are you saving by going from 110 to 86?
It was about the same, but there's more property on this that we have now, so that's probably why the percentage is more the same.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? I have a couple of questions. This is a follow-up to the questions that you did answer. I had asked the question, what is the minimum buffer around the wetlands? You said 15 feet. There are a couple of places on the north around this cul-de-sac that does not appear to be any buffer based upon the drawing. Is that correct? This is page 50 of our agenda. They're at lot 69 and lot 72.
Right. There's a slight impact to the wetland in that area due to the grade differential. So there would be no, where you have an impact, then there would be no buffer. It would be a small impact. But the way the district is for those unimpacted wetlands, it's 15-foot minimum, 25-foot average, and I think we've
Well,
exceeded some.
I understand it's 15-foot minimum, but doesn't appear to be any 15-foot minimum there. Is that correct?
Not where we're impacting it, no, there'd be zero, because we're actually having to fill up a little bit in the wetlands to get that lot developable.
Okay.
I mean, it's.
My next question then was, the wetland impact area is .68. And is that impact offset with the creation of .68 acres of wetlands, so there's no net loss of wetlands? Your answer was most likely, not on site. They will most likely be mitigated off-site for no net loss within the basin.
Yes.
How are you defining basin?
The
I
way-
define a basin as this particular wetland.
No, sir, the way the St. John's defines basins is is a watershed basin.
Okay, so that could be in Volusia County.
It's possible. It's possible.
Okay. Can't you easily, based upon the land area you have a no net loss on this site? You have sufficient area in which you could do that, don't you?
Possibly. That is something we have to talk to the client. Most wetland creation has not been done in a while. It used to be done in the past. It's such a burden to the development because of the long-term upkeep and monitoring and all that. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. It's been probably 15 years since I've seen anybody do a wetland creation on site.
Well, Brevard County's regulation currently is no net loss within Brevard County, isn't that correct?
There's been some debate on that, what that actually means.
Well, they've had that regulation for a long time, isn't that correct?
Yeah, but they also allow you to do 1.8% impact.
So they will allow an impact up to a certain level before you have to.
Yes, you can do the impact, and then as long as you give them a mitigation agreement with the mitigation bank, then that satisfies the no net loss.
As a part of this review process on the master plan, since there are so many trees that will be impacted, removed, would you be willing to agree as a part of this application to have trees within the dry retention area and the compensatory storage area?
I can't speak for the applicant on that, but that would be if we have to meet the landscape requirement and that's a viable place to put landscaping, I don't see why we wouldn't. I mean, the only thing that we see, and I don't know how the city reviews stormwater designs nowadays, but I know that they make you deduct the tree as a volume to the pond. So if you put a bunch of trees in the pond, you reduce the volume of the pond. Therefore, we got to make the pond bigger, and therefore we impact more trees. So,
Chairman, if I could jump in real quick. When I've spoken in the past with KB Ofosu, Community Development Engineer, about plantings and dry retention, the beds of the ponds, he has typically said that we can't allow that because of having to calculate for the volume of the growth of the tree. And what we instead prefer is that they be planted along the slopes, the bank around the pond, because the bed, it's just with the stormwater, making sure that it can hold the stormwater volume that it's designed to, and then with the unknown of the growth of the tree, it's typically not allowed.
Well, at Titus Landing, I see cypress trees in the bottom of those retention areas. I mean, you're going to have a large area of compensatory storage, assuming for the moment that's wet. Isn't that an ideal location for cypress trees?
It's a wide open space that would be great for growing trees, but I can't speak, I'm not a stormwater engineer, how that would impact it, and all I can tell you is that in the past, when we've had discussions about projects that are looking to add more trees so they can reduce the amount of mitigation they have to do, when I've spoken to Mr. Ofosu, he has requested that they plant around the edges instead.
One of the, I think a lot of our members here have not been faced with is the concept of compensatory storage. As an engineer, could you explain what we're talking about as far as compensatory storage?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, what happens in compensatory storage is if you do any fill within the 100-year floodplain, you have to provide for whatever fill you put in, you have to provide that extra volume within the floodplain so that there's no displacement of volume. So if you dig a scoop out of here, or you put a scoop of dirt in here, you got to take a scoop out over here so it equals. So for every piece of floodplain that we fill in up to the base flood elevation, we have to find that same volume somewhere else on the site to make up for it, to compensate for it.
Thank you. That's all I have. Anyone else have any questions? The applicant,
I
yes.
have just
Go
one
ahead.
question.
Go ahead.
Kathy Riley. Mr. Moya, we've received an email from a resident, Bill Klein, that says that 171 trees will be removed based on your plan, which includes 11 trees that are 36 inches to 48 inches in diameter. And my question is, would the original plan have caused the removal of that many trees, or is this better or worse than the original plan?
Yeah, the original plan that we had a larger area where we would have impacted a lot more trees. So this would save a lot more trees than the original development. And one thing I did fail to mention, I did want to mention this because I think it's important because it goes back to the LID thing, is Mr. Is it Buto with the Marine Resources Council? Originally was looking at the old plan, and when we showed him the new plan, he removed his objection to this project and actually submitted his recommendation for approval. And he's with the Marine Resources Council because he feels it is low impact development. So.
Okay. Member Parrish, I think you had a question.
As I understand it, it's proposed that all of the utilities will be underground.
Yes, ma'am.
And how will those utilities be routed? Out to Park Avenue?
Well, you will have an on-site lift station for the sewer, which will go to the force main that's in Park Avenue, and we will tie into the existing water main in Park Avenue and run that underground through the.
Okay,
through the
and
development.
the force main that goes to Park Avenue, what route does it take?
It's, well, it's, I believe the force main is existing along the, is it the west side or the east side? So all we would do is cross the road to tie into the existing system.
But your lift station is in a central point.
Yes, ma'am.
And how does it get from the lift station to that place on Park Avenue?
Through the right of way and the property?
The roadway?
Through the roadway, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so if there's a storm event or any event that disrupts the roadway, potentially the waste goes into the wetlands.
You mean like if the lift station fails and fills up?
Lift station fails, or if the roadway fails.
If the roadway, I mean, do you mean, so if the roadway blew out, like actually washed away?
Any kind of storm event that would compromise the sewer line in the roadway right-of-way.
Yeah, I mean, we're not in a velocity zone and we're not in a high hazard coastal zone, so I wouldn't say that a rainfall event would do any damage to the road, even if it flooded the road, which I don't think it would since we're 3 feet higher than the flood zone. So I don't think that would happen. And just so you know, the lift station will be dedicated to the city to maintain, so just like all the lift stations. So that they have a maintenance plan to make sure all that stuff doesn't happen.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other persons speaking in favor?
No, sir.
Okay, why don't you call
Charles Tucker.
Mr. Tucker?
Thank you. I am Charles Tucker, lived in Central Park Estates for 28 years and Titusville for 59 years. I think everybody's already got my comments. Some of them have already been addressed, but I just want to highlight them for the record, I guess. We are pleased that the lots have been reduced from 110 to 86, but that is out of necessity, as you heard. There's more wetlands, more impacts here. And I am very concerned about what happens if they get in there and find more issues, which we all know during construction you always do. And I think there should be a developer bond on this project if it proceeds forward, so that if they stop, it can be at least returned to its somewhat original state. Because he did say it was a marginal project, and many of these changes are because they're trying to cut costs. The development was moved closer to Park Avenue Baptist Church. I don't know how much closer. That's a question I have. That wall that was supposed to run along Park Avenue Church on the north side of the property, I think is very important, because there's a school on that property and there's kids running around there, and God forbid one of them get into the retention pond. So I don't think clearing out a 3-foot section wide to put in a wall is unreasonable. Then we are concerned, some of y'all have already discussed the impacts of the flooding and the wetland impacts and environmental and trees. Other people are going to talk about that know a whole lot more about it than I do. When you guys originally approved this, I think Mr. Sievers may have been one of the only ones on here at that time, but the lot size was a big issue, and they came to us and y'all actually approved a master plan that had lot sizes from 5,000 to 9,000 square feet. And we were assured that that was going to be the size, that there wouldn't be a bunch of 50 by 100 lots. Now, what are there now? They're all 50 by 100, or 20% of them 45 now. So, we kind of feel like a bait and switch was pulled there. And so I would ask that all these lots stay 50 by 100. The surrounding area, the 2 new developments close to it, Country Club Estates are 8,800 square foot lots. Park Preserve just down the street is 6,500 square foot lots. And we across the street are about 13,000 square feet. So these are tiny, tiny. The roads and traffic, I think, is a big deal. Reducing the size of the road from 26 foot to 22 foot. I think they need to comply with the code. It's there for a reason. Our road is 26 foot, and we have problems all the time getting emergency vehicles down there. People park their boats there, their cars. They can't get down a 26-foot road. I don't know how they're going to get down a 22-foot road with lots on one side and a lift station on the other side. So I don't know how you restrict parking to one side. And then I was concerned about the traffic on Park Avenue. Here tonight I heard that traffic count wasn't even for Park Avenue, so I don't know what the traffic count is out there. I think that's important to know before you proceed, what kind of impact this is going to have on the traffic there. And I guess that's my biggest concerns. I was at the community meeting. None of these issues were addressed then. And again, I just feel like we're being switched out here at the last minute. And all of these changes, I believe, are solely to save money. Smaller streets saves a lot of money. Smaller lots saves money. And not putting in a wall saves money. And if it's already marginal, I just think this is a potential problem. We've had subdivisions sit around Titusville vacant for years, and I don't want to see that happen across the street from me. So thank you.
Mr. Tucker?
Question.
Go ahead. So are you against this project in its entirety?
No, I know development's going to happen, and I think that's good for Titusville. Titusville needs to grow, but I don't think this is the best that can be done for this property. I'm not a developer, I can't tell you. I mean, my kids are asking for bigger lots. I know the one access is a huge problem as well. I forgot to mention that. But they are developing the property right adjacent on the east side of this. And I don't see why a deal couldn't be worked out to have an access through that side. That would alleviate a lot of problems with two accesses. The traffic would be less, and people could get out in an event of emergency. But no, I'm not against the development totally, and they've done a good job on some things. You know, I like the conservation aspect and stuff, but I just don't think this is the best that can be done. I think they're just trying to force it now that they're where they are. So,
Thank you, sir.
I had one question.
Member Burke?
You mentioned that your road is 26 feet wide.
Yes.
Is it pavement 26 or?
from gutter to gutter.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier, I went out and measured the street today, and then Mr. Galenda did some clarification for me in regard to when they talk about 26 feet, it's pavement. In the case of my street, which is very
Okay.
similar to yours,
Okay.
we meet the 26 feet, but that has to do with our curb and gutter also, so.
Okay.
I
So
have-
this one would be 26 feet from gutter to gutter?
What I read to Member Murray is the code requires the pavement width to be 26 feet.
Okay.
And just trying to do a comparison, Mr. Tucker, in
Right.
regard to,
Okay.
yeah. No, I
Right.
have the same concern
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
street width, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that you understood
Okay.
it was that pavement piece that they're doing that measurement off of.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next.
Kevin Cunningham.
Good evening. I also live in Central Park Estates across from where this new development is going in. And one proposal I have that might address a lot of concerns. Well, first off, let me point out that this development and the adjacent to the west, Falcon's Roost, which I've been unable to look at a sketch plat, but I believe it is this commission's capability to coordinate the two developments so that there can be access between the two developments. And as a compromise, these two developments are also falling between two separate schools, Apollo Elementary and Park Avenue Baptist Church School. What I propose as a compromise is create a right-of-way, single lane wide off the west side of the development that ties into Falcon's Roost sketch plat that would not increase the permeable area, would be designated for emergency use only in case there was a flood or fire. And it would also serve as a walk path for students, whether they are going from Falcon's Roost to Park Avenue School, or walking path from Huntington Park to Apollo Elementary, without having to go out to Park Avenue, down to the intersection of Park Avenue and Knox McCrae, and a convoluted route for these elementary school students. So, as far as my other objections to this, I would love to see the minimum lot size increase to 6,500, but I do appreciate what Mr. Moyer and the developers have done with reducing the number of lots. So I'm not going to bring that up too much. And final question for staff. Behind, to the north of my lot is a stormwater retention area. Is there any scenarios where rainfall would result in water from this development traveling east, either under or over Park Avenue, and onto increasing the flooding of the land to my north?
That would have to defer to the applicant about the design of this project, as whether it meets the criteria of the code, and answer that question. So I would defer to the applicant to be able to explain about about the stormwater design of this development.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions of me?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
I mainly have a question for, I guess, for the city. Listen to Mr., I'm sorry?
Cunningham.
Cunningham, I'm sorry, excuse me. Talk about connecting the two developments together. Whose responsibility would be, if that was recommended, to build this roadway or this pathway? Would it be the city or would it be the developer's responsibility?
The developer in both cases would be responsible. I don't know if you wanted to ask the applicant on specifics on how that could happen, but from what I understand, the sketch plat for Falcon's Roost includes 2 lots where the connection for the approved master plan that shows 2 access points. Right now on the Falcon's Roost sketch plat shows 2 lots. And so the design does not consider making a connection there with the roadway.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So the design, the sketch plat, the layout for Falcon's Roost, the
Right.
subdivision to the west, currently shows 2 residential units, 2 lots at the end of the roadway, and doesn't consider any kind of connection. So that would have to be something that both engineers would have to agree to, would have to design together,
Right.
and then they'd be responsible up to the project limits, the property line, to develop that.
It just sounded like a capital idea to me, but, thank you.
Yeah, if it's that single lane, emergency use only is considered into a right-of-way as part of the approved master plan, I think that would resolve a lot of issues. Again, thank you for your time.
I had a question.
Member Murray.
Mr. Cunningham.
Yes.
So if we were to look, and I don't know if Mr. Moya can bring that plat forward, what I'm seeing on my screen is lots probably 50 and 51. If you want to, do you have one in front of you, or do you want to step over to my screen?
As I was looking at the lots, I was looking at between lots 59 and 60. And that would put it between 2 trees that looks like they're trying to save.
My next question actually is staff associated with this. So just for clarification, currently, they meet all the code requirements for ingress and egress. If they should go the route of the waiver, and work should be done to determine, I mean, they don't meet the 26 feet, they don't meet all kinds of stuff, they go that route, then engineering would get involved to determine what else would have to be done to this property, correct?
Correct. And I do want to distinguish the access from the pavement width, because the waiver would only be required for the pavement width.
And the speculation I made is they could potentially, because of fire engines or whatever, make a request for some other egress. Mr. Cunningham, I think some of the comments you made are really great in regard to paths for the kids and so on and so forth. The challenge we sometimes have is code compliance and whether or not they've met that code compliance. This is one of those kind of gray areas.
Well, isn't code compliance the minimum requirement? And we can ask as part of this planning and having 2 developments that are going through here, a master plan and Falcon's Roost, a sketch plat, that this is the ideal time to coordinate those 2 efforts.
I completely understand the intent of where you're going. I think the challenge is whether or not that's something that is achievable. And my understanding, and maybe Chelsea can help me with this, sometimes we have to be cautious what we ask developers to do so that we don't impact them negatively in certain areas. So we don't currently have a method for those 2 developments to coordinate, correct?
That's correct. The Falcon's Roost development is a sketch plat that is going through a process to reapprove what was once already approved and just expired. And so it's a 28-lot subdivision that's going through review right now. There's not a master plan associated with it. It's not a PD or rezoning associated with it. It's just a standard sketch plat, which will come before you eventually.
Okay.
And so they're below the minimum threshold for requiring a second access point, so we didn't require it for that particular development. But that's currently in review right now.
And
But-
so just for clarification, this development doesn't require it, and Falcon Roost definitely doesn't require it because they're 23 lots. Again, what I'm hearing Mr. Cunningham say is it would be great if somebody looked at that. And I think Mr. Cunningham, is going to be one of those situations that it comes down to what happens with the reviews as they move forward. Because
Yes.
right now, they do, unfortunately, they meet the minimums and stuff, so. But I clearly hear what you're asking for.
But if we also went back to the issue of parking on the street, there was a point made of having it part of the approval process that the homeowners association will enforce parking on only one side of the street. That's not a city requirement.
Correct.
But that is something that this board is considering having as part of the approval process. We're putting in a stipulation. Well, I ask that the access, single lane, unpaved, that would not increase the impermeable surface area, ask if that access between the two, and it's not a paved road, it's not going to do any traffic change except for an emergency.
And so, but they would remove 2 lots in order to accomplish that?
As only a single lane wide, it would not remove 2 lots.
Okay,
It would only remove 1.
thank you.
Okay. Any other thing?
Mr. Richardson?
Well, Mr. Parrish answered my question. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Next.
Howard Beekler.
Good evening. My name is Howard Bigler. I'm also a resident of Central Park, been there for just over 20 years, and a resident of Titusville for over 55 years. And I'm not necessarily against the development, but I'm certainly not in favor of some of the changes that have been made. I think a lot of these were made because I think over time they've realized that the uplands are not nearly as big as they can develop, not just because the survey was incorrect. I think it was a matter of economics, that they realized that they couldn't develop the 110 lots. I think the road size has been reduced, not because of pervious, but because, again, cost. You make a wider road, it pushes those lots further into the wetland areas, which would cause more mediation. And I get it, developers don't want to lose money, they want to make money. That's the whole purpose of going through and developing. Titusville is prime for development right now. I'm pro for development. I think it's important for the city to continue to grow. But we have to be smart about it, and we can't lose sight of the fact that we have a beautiful estuary over there that is now going to occupy a bunch of homes, which, again, I'm not necessarily against, but I think a lot of it, the decisions that are being made, is 100% financial right now. The wall being removed for the buffer, again, I think that's not because of the fact that they're going to cut down more trees. I think it comes down to dollars and cents. I know when we developed our area, I was very unhappy with our developer because he came in and basically clear cut a bunch of beautiful trees. And I'll use my lot as an example. He cleared everything where I wasn't going to put my house. And then when I went to build my house, I had no choice but to remove a lot of trees because that's where my house was going. And so I think a lot of the decisions that are made in this particular case are being made for dollars and cents and not necessarily for the well-being of the environment in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, gentlemen? Don't see any. Next.
Janet Parker.
Hi, my name is Janet Parker. I have a concern about the roadway. I live in Central Park Estates as well. As Charles said, our road is 26 feet. And I can tell you that when 2 people park on both sides of the street, the trash trucks can't go through because I listen to them when they have to back up for 20 minutes to get out of the subdivision. So I'm assuming that the fire trucks can't get through as well. So that's a concern to me. I have a concern, the lot size isn't ideal, but he has made an attempt to shrink everything. And the other concern I have is not being able to have another way out of the neighborhood. So it just doesn't make sense to me to reduce everything and not have that second roadway. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
are you against the development of this?
I'm not against the development. I am against some of the criteria in the development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next card.
Case 8 Ange.
My name is Kay St. Ange, and I live at 2360 Maryland Avenue. Will you let her hold this up? Or is that okay? Okay, thank you. This incredible parcel of land has extensive wetlands with huge, magnificent trees. An oak 72 inches in diameter at breast height. Just imagine, this is 48, so 72 inches in diameter at breast height, and 3 oaks 60 inches DBH are part of the 79.7 wooded acreage proposed for development. While the developer plans to preserve these 4 trees, he intends to demolish 171 trees over 20 inches DBH, including 11 trees 36 to 48 inches per the applicant's tree demolition plan. Also, per his tree mitigation tabulations, because of the amount of tree preservation area, he will not have to do any additional mitigation. That is also in his tabulations on his charts that you have in your packet. The developer also proposes building a road with a culvert across the wetland so as to add fill and houses on both sides of the wetland. Straddling the wetland will certainly have a negative effect on the wetland's hydrology, as the development's impervious surfaces will reduce rainfall infiltration into the wetland. If indeed the development sketch plat is to be recommended tonight, please consider recommending preserving as many large trees as possible. Current Code Section 3040 indicates the developer agrees to work with staff and adjust the proposed layout to preserve more trees and specifically to preserve mitigation-sized trees. I ask that staff do just that, making every effort while working with the developer to preserve those trees 32 inches or larger as per council's directive. Let me suggest consideration be given to these proposals to preserve several large trees as shown in this diagram. Back up just a little bit. To preserve lot 64's 5 large oaks measuring 48 inches, 46 inches, 38 inches, 30 inches, and 20 inches, the lot could be incorporated into the adjacent tree preservation area. Larger trees can add 15% to the value of homes in the neighborhood per the University of Washington.
Why don't you go ahead? I've let everybody keep going, so go ahead.
Okay. Slight adjustments in layout of dry retention ponds could save 3 trees 36 inches to 38 inches, here, here, and here. A large tree might be saved in each cul-de-sac island, providing the island protects the critical root zones. In the north cul-de-sac, a 48-inch oak might be preserved in this way. And I've sent you a picture showing a large tree preserved in a cul-de-sac island. So it can be done. 19 trees 28 inches DBH or greater are to be removed to accommodate this dry retention area right here. If the low-impact development strategy of retaining large trees was utilized, this dry retention pond might possibly be eliminated. As the U.S. Department of Agriculture indicates, a 100-foot tall tree can absorb 11,000 gallons of water from the soil in a single growing season. Preserving 19 trees might be more effective than a dry retention pond. Other mitigation-sized trees in the property line with the tree preservation area might be preserved on Lot 30, 31, and 69. Might I suggest that as a condition of recommending the approval of the sketch plat, the developer abide by current code and work with staff adjusting the proposed layout to preserve more mitigation-sized trees. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Any questions?
No, but I have a comment.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you for your passion and dedication to the preservation of trees. I received your email. I'm sure we all did.
Yes.
And you have some very good proposals.
Thank you very much.
I agree that any developer should work closer with the city or our staff to preserve as many trees as possible. And I love the idea of the island. I love that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Member Murray?
Yes.
And again, I appreciate all the work you've done. I think you're a prime example of how when the ordinances and codes don't correspond with where we need to be in the future, you've worked diligently towards that. I have had discussions with the city engineers in regard to dry retention and the trees and whether or not it's appropriate there. And the direction I was given at the time was no, trees do not belong in dry retention, and I had a full explanation of why. In regard to the cul-de-sacs, in order to do the tree wells that you're asking for, would these lots not have to be pushed back into the wetlands?
I'm not an engineer. I couldn't tell you that.
And just for clarification, especially on, I believe the north side, I get confused on these, which east-west on the north side, it would impact the wetlands in order to accommodate that one particular tree. Is that a compromise you're willing to make?
Well, I have heard council say that they want to preserve the trees 32 inches or larger. To preserve a 48-inch tree then would require some adjustment and some compromises. He also could not even have a lot adjacent to that, or make a smaller lot. It is up to the developer to figure out how to save the trees. I'm just making some proposals, but as far as how the layout could be changed to accommodate the trees, that is up to the developer and city council and staff to work that out. These are proposals that would have to be engineered.
Okay. And just for a point of clarification, I think that sometimes when I listen to all of the information here tonight, the trick is the balance between lots and roads and trees and wetlands, and it's not an easy situation by any means. I posed the question over the last few days to staff in regard to the tree mitigation, if any dollars would be associated with this, and Mr. Glenda came back and explained to me, based on all of the different requirements that the developer has currently made, they would not be paying into the tree mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
So they have done quite a bit of work in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure if everybody's well aware of that perspective. So we are losing a lot of trees here in the two upland areas. And as people have heard me talk about before, wetlands are so critical to me. And we've got a huge challenge here when you look at the GIS, how much of the city that remains is wetland. And getting creative and figuring out the lowest impact to the wetland has to be balanced with the trees also. I completely agree with Member Grant that all of these things should be considered. The one caution I keep wanting to bring up is we have to be so cautious when we make recommendations and put conditions on that we are not doing an impact that we're not allowed by law to do. So it's not that we're not listening, we have our hands tied sometimes, so.
Well, I'm neither a city attorney nor am I an engineer. I just want to preserve as many trees as possible. And that's what I'm asking that people do, to try to look at possible layouts, adjustments to preserve these larger trees. But when I hear council say, oh, we shouldn't remove any trees 48 inches or that large, then there will have to be compromises made by the applicant to preserve those trees. The road could be shifted this way or that way. The lot line for that house could be shifted, reduced. There are many ways that I think the developer and city staff are aware of how to preserve the trees. I'm not aware of each and every one, but I am aware there is a 48-inch tree at that location because I zoomed in on the tree survey that the developer provided.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next card.
Laura Lee Thompson.
I'm going to start by saying I'm neither for or against this particular development. I believe Mr. Moya has worked hard to try to preserve some trees. I think, you know, to say that he should be rewarded for keeping 50% of it in conservation is kind of misleading because 50% of it is wetlands and you can't develop there anyway. And I guess the rest of what I'm going to say is just thoughts for the future. If we continue to allow the city to keep building and building and building on all of our vacant lands and we fill them up with houses, how on earth are we going to be able to fulfill the future requirement of having recreation areas within a quarter of a mile of each individual subdivision? And if anyone tried to get to that man's house out in Sherwood during Christmas to go see the big Christmas display, he's at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was chaos. It was utter chaos. And people parked on both sides of the road going into the cul-de-sac, around the cul-de-sac, and the neighbors were having to get out and direct traffic, but there's no way that you could have gotten an emergency vehicle through there, and I'm sure that those are 26-foot wide streets. As Member Murray pointed out, the sewage infrastructure, especially in the old Whispering Hills subdivision, is ancient. It was probably put in, that force main along Park Avenue was probably put in about the same time that the force main along US 1 by Sandpoint Park was put in. And we've all seen the weeks-long spectacle that's been going on trying to fix that problem. So like when you think about the concurrency for sewage and lift stations and stuff like that, yes, there probably is, you know, the concurrency is probably being met as long as it's operational, but we have these surprises, and Titusville seems to be, unfortunately, having a lot of these bombs going off, you know, from old infrastructure that was put in before we knew a lot about what we're doing, and we're going to keep on loading up these old force mains as we add new subdivisions. And that's something that you need to think about too. This is a marginal property. That's all that's left in Titusville. And, you know, marginal sounds like a bad word, but actually these are beautiful pieces of property. There are aquifer recharge areas. They're surrounded by wetlands. They're half of them are inaccessible, and they're all we have left to develop. And so I would urge you as a body to please keep that in mind. Titusville's topography is very unique. It's unlike the topography in any other part of the county. If you go down to Palm Bay, other than the Atlantic Coastal Ridge right by the railroad track, it's flat as a pancake. We have these beautiful hills and ridges and embedded wetlands that are so special, and it's not like that anywhere else in the county. It's not like that in Volusia County. We are a special place. So as we develop, we need to encourage the type of development that's not going to harm these very, very marginal places that are so special. That's all we have left. Thank you.
Any questions? Member Murray.
First of all, the work that you do also needs to be acknowledged. You're just such an advocate for our city and our environment, so I really appreciate your work. Keeping marginal properties in mind, because there are so many out there. The majority of what's left, where we live, this community that we're talking about, is not far off south, which is a lot of wetland that's going to be developed as each one of those parcels are up for sale. This is putting all of the development into the uplands and preserving the wetlands. Is that? I'm trying to figure out.
To be a functioning ecosystem, you have to have upland borders around a wetland. And my personal opinion, the law says you need a 15-foot border around the wetlands. It's not enough. It's not enough for the wildlife that lives there. It's not enough for the humans that are going to try to be living there. You're cramming little tiny lots on small streets into dead-end cul-de-sacs in an area that could go up in flames during the dry season. But for the wetlands to be truly functional, they need this upland interface also. They need uplands. You need like a middle section. It's just like the lagoon. You have to have this intertidal area. You can't just put rocks and seawalls, up against the lagoon and expect it to remain healthy, because you lose that transitional area between the uplands and the water bodies. And that's just how it is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next.
Kathleen Burson.
Good evening. How are you? My name is Kathleen Burson, Titusville, Florida. I'm going to continue with Laura Lee's line and then follow what Kay was saying. No ecosystem is an island. A wetland is an ecosystem. It has its own species, its own, particular plants that grow there that makes it a particular ecosystem. So when Laura Lee was talking about the lagoon, if you want to create a wet desert, put a wall around the lagoon. Build houses on every edge. We're so lucky. Laura Lee and I were talking about this yesterday or today. And North Brevard has so much natural land up against the lagoon that we haven't lost it yet. We could. There is some major pollution that's coming to the lagoon despite our natural borders. But if you want to kill the lagoon real quick, put a wall around it. Every shoreline with rocks and walls, Another point I want to make is that trees that Kay mentioned, I want to say it again because it's very striking that we don't know better in 2021 as design professionals. I'm a landscape architect and I specialize in LID. I make it a point of my business to do good by the land, that trees can be planted in retention ponds because they take up the thousands of gallons of water every year that Kay mentioned, and then they evapotranspirate back into the environment. So yes, you can plant trees in retention ponds and they don't take up the volume, they don't You don't need bigger ponds because you put the trees there. You need less of a pond because the trees uptake the water up into the branches. So they work with the pond. So I think I think we all made that point. I think the really wise direction is to take the focus on what Kay St. Onge has been trying to bring across to us for a long time now. And this is what will happen once we get the new tree code into place, is staff is going to have, it won't have to come to you because staff is going to make the developer adjust the design. Nobody wants to tell development to go away, but staff is going to sit down with them and say, you need to subtract this lot, and this lot to preserve these trees. And that's exactly what Kay is saying to us. This is the best approach to really make this project work for everyone. Thank you.
Ma'am? Ma'am?
Kathleen?
You mentioned,
Oh, I can't tell who's talking.
you mentioned low-impact development. In your opinion, looking at this property, would it be a good candidate, or would it be a candidate for low-impact development?
Well, if you look at the details that have been mentioned, when you make roadways narrower, that's to make more wooded area. That's to preserve wooded area. That's not to, I think the roads had to be made narrower for the houses to get those small lots in there and the number of lots. That's not LID. And I think that's very dangerous too. If a fire truck comes through there and he has to back up because he sees an accident in the middle, or there's two cars blocking the roadway, how's he going to get back out to go around to Falcon Roost to go in that way? You know, it's going to be too late. So, no, I don't see that as LID, but I would do it a little different. I would follow what Kay is suggesting. And
No, I mean,
Yeah.
do you think LID could be implemented on this site?
oh, could it? Yes, with taking Ms. St. Onge's approach, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Next card?
No more cards.
No more cards. The applicant that has the right for rebuttal.
Yes, thank you, Bruce Moy again, as the applicant. Couple things. This is quasi-judicial, so I did hear a lot of testimony, and I do understand the passion behind the testimony. I would have to say that there was a lot of emotion. I'm not sure there was a lot of fact. I'm going to start with the roads in particular because I don't think anybody in here is a safety expert, but the road requirement in Broward County, 22 feet. The road width requirement in Palm Bay, 22 feet. The biggest reason we want the reduction in the road is to really meet county standards and other city standards that they feel is safe, as well as reducing the impact to the trees by making the retention ponds as small as possible. So I think we heard low impact development. I think that's a really good reason to keep that as a 22-foot road with curb on both sides. It's very consistent with the rest of the county. So we're not doing it to save money. I kind of take a little bit of offense to that. We've painstakingly designed this project to preserve as many trees as possible, to do compact development, reduce the amount of improvements. We designed it and almost made it sound like it was a bad thing that we designed this that we don't even need to put any mitigation in. We saved enough trees that we don't have to mitigate. We're not removing enough trees to where we have to actually mitigate for what we're doing. And I have to agree, the one thing I do agree with Laura Lee, who I admire very much, very nice lady and very intelligent, is you need uplands to make the wetland system work. And we don't have 50% wetlands on the site, and we're not preserving because we don't want to spend the money to impact. We're preserving it because that's the right thing to do, and St. John's frowns upon impacting wetlands, and we're only impacting it for the minimum amount possible to make this a viable development. At 46% wetlands on the site, we're also preserving another 22% of the existing uplands. So we're preserving 2/3 of the property, an 80-acre site, and we're only developing 1/3 of the property, and we're saving so many trees we don't have to mitigate. I think that shows that, I think I should get carried out of this door on everybody's shoulders saying, wow, this is a great development. Not going to happen, obviously. But I think you can see what we've tried to do here. To limit the development on 1/3 of the property is, I think, amazing. I've never seen it. I've never seen it. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, but it just doesn't usually happen. Have a little consideration for the developer. He bought this property fully thinking he was going to get 110 lots and paid that price for this property thinking he was going to get 110 lots. Once we got all the information and did the design and really tried to make this thing work, he's going to live with 86. That's a huge hit. So, yeah, when it is marginal, yeah, it is marginal because he's going to be marginal that he's going to be able to develop this and make a profit. He's not going to hit a home run. He probably isn't going to even hit a triple. So he's not going to walk away from this with a bunch of money in his pocket. He's going to probably make a modest profit. He's going to build all the homes. They're going to be nice new homes. Holiday Builders is a very well-respected builder in the community. They really want to have a product here in Titusville. I think they already do, but especially here and in this setting, in a nice preservation setting, they think they get a premium cost because it's going to be so nice and so preserved. So I think that we've done an excellent job in that regards. I don't believe that second exit is necessary. We only have less lots on the west side than we had before, and we don't exceed the requirement for the city or the county or any other city in the county for lots requiring more than one access. Your fire department says it's okay. I don't know. I don't think anybody else is more of an expert on safety than your fire department, your fire chief. So being quasi-judicial, I think that carries a lot of weight. So I think that's all the issues I really wanted to discuss. Oh, stormwater. I do not agree at all that a tree can provide treatment of stormwater in the rate that stormwater falls. Yes, a tree can do what some of these people say can do, but they're not going to do it in a 24-hour period. They're not going to do it when the rain's falling in a 1-hour storm. When you get 3 inches of water, that tree cannot possibly soak up that much water. So the St. John's doesn't agree with that. They do not consider trees as being stormwater retention alternatives. They consider them as an impediment to stormwater volume treatment. So that's a fact. And I don't know that anybody can dispute that. So can a tree, treat water? Yes, over time, over quite a bit of time. But rainfall, and everybody knows that lives here, rainfall is pretty fast around here. And I don't think a tree can handle that. So I don't agree with that. And as far as Kay's proposal would be great. If we could design a property and all we had to consider was the trees, that'd be amazing. But that's not what's happening here. We have trees, we have wetlands, we have significant grade changes, we have high water tables, we have retention requirements, we have buffer requirements, we have upland preservation requirements, so on and on and on. So we've done what we feel is the best job preserving as many trees as possible, limiting the impact of the development area to a third of the 80-acre property, and minimizing the impact by reducing the lot count. So I think that it's way better than what was approved previously, and I hope that you can agree and approve this so we can move forward. So I'll answer any other questions that you have.
Anyone have any question, Member Murray?
Mr. Moya, for the record, can you just give us your credentials and area of expertise?
Yes, ma'am. I am a professional engineer registered in the state of Florida. I've been a registered engineer since 1996. I was the county engineer for Brevard County for 4.5 years. I've been doing this under my own business since 2002. I'm a member of the Planning and Zoning Committee for the Brevard County, also for the city of Indian Harbor Beach. And I've provided expert testimony and been considered an expert by the city of Palm Bay and the city of West Melbourne, and I believe by the city of Titusville as well.
Any other questions? I just want to compliment your drawings as far as the clarity and being able to read them in comparison to lots of other drawings, and your depiction of the trees, locations, and the different color shadings that reflect what's happening on the site. I just want to compliment your engineering drawings in comparison with others I have seen.
Thank you. I'll let Brian know you said you're really happy to hear that.
Well,
a lot of work.
It's a job well done, comparatively speaking. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would like to, for the moment, since this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and this may be the first, second, or third quasi-judicial proceeding that some members have had to deal with, and I know you've done this, counsel, but if you could tell the commission what our standards are review. This is not a legislative function where we're changing the comprehensive plan, but a quasi-judicial proceeding, and there are certain rules by which we need to follow.
Sure. As we mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, this meeting is conducted in accordance with Resolution Number 24-1997, which guidance has been provided to all of the members of the commission and is on record here at the city. A quasi-judicial hearing, as we all know, is a site-specific zoning change, and the applicant is entitled to additional amount of time and due process to present the case, which we have seen here tonight. One of the components of the quasi-judicial proceeding is to disclose any ex parte communications that, again, has been asked at the beginning of this hearing. There are guidelines for the procedure in the event any of the board members have received any ex parte communications. At this time, we will just do that one more time. Or if anyone has not already disclosed any ex parte communications that they may have had prior to this hearing, now would be an appropriate time to do so. That also includes receiving or reading any written communication from any person relating to this proceeding that others have not received that has not already been disclosed. It also includes conducting an investigation or site visit, receiving any expert opinions on this quasi-judicial proceeding. There was a mention on the evidentiary requirements. The burden of proof in a quasi-judicial hearing is that the landowner or the applicant has the burden to demonstrate that their application complies with the reasonable procedural requirements of the zoning ordinance and that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Upon such a showing by the landowner, the burden shifts to the board to demonstrate that maintaining the existing zoning classification with respect to the property accomplishes a legitimate public purpose. After such showing by the board, the applicant's only recourse is to assert and prove that the actions of the board in denying the petition or application are confiscatory and thereby constitutes a taking. So if this board wants to deny the proceeding, then that would be the applicant's burden to demonstrate. The basis for board decision-making is based upon fact, the facts that have been presented. All interested parties should be given a full and fair opportunity to express their views. I believe that has been done here. The board must have before it competent, substantial evidence to support your findings and judgment, which must be in accord with the essential requirements of law. While the board should hear the objections of interested parties, the board's judgment must be based on the facts adduced, not on the mere polling of interested parties. In other words, the function of this quasi-judicial board is to make a determination on the basis of facts adduced in relevant zoning principles as set forth in a zoning ordinance, rather than the conduct of the neighbors. Standing alone, the opinions and objections of interested parties are not factual evidence and not a sound basis for a denial of a petition or application for a quasi-judicial action on a zoning-related matter unless supported by facts, ordinance criteria, or comprehensive plan requirements. The resolution goes on to describe lay versus expert witnesses, and it states, the board shall not consider the testimony of a witness unless the witness has personal knowledge of the fact in which the witness will testify to. In the case of opinions or inferences, the testimony must be qualified under 6.4b or c, which is that 6.4b is layman witnesses. Lay witnesses will be encouraged to give information based on their personal knowledge and may give opinions or expert testimony only if they are qualified to express an opinion or have special knowledge or training on an opinion that does not, or the opinion does not require special knowledge or training. Expert witnesses, on the other hand, is qualified only if the board determines that whether the subject matter is proper for expert testimony because it is scientific, technical, or a specialized skill will help the board understand the evidence being presented and whether the witness is adequately qualified to express an opinion on a matter. It goes on to provide qualifications of an expert and of city staff and details regarding the presentation and the record. I believe that covers it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions of legal counsel? To try to summarize that a little bit if I can. As staff has enumerated various criteria in on page 30 through 37 and pages 38 through 40. And you need to look and review those criteria and determine whether or not they are in compliance with the requirements. They have met their burden of proof and you're satisfied they have met their burden of proof. If you do not feel as though they have, then it's best either to ground your reasons for denial based upon the comprehensive plan or civic provisions that you can identify in the code. So that's the reason why quasi-judicial is a lot different than legislative functions as such. And I will open it up for discussion. Anyone like to, I'm not recommending this, but fortunately, if you're not in a position where you think you can make a decision tonight, we will have another Planning and Zoning Commission meeting before this is heard by the City Council on January the 26th. If you want additional information, we have, again, another Planning and Zoning Commission meeting prior to its advertised before the city council. Certainly, everybody has received a lot of information, and as the applicant indicated, I was here originally when this was heard. Unfortunately for the applicant, I raised some issues as far as compliance with the comprehensive plan, and staff had to start all over in their process and make certain amendments by which this could be processed. And they made some changes in the code, which I voted against. For example, that conservation land, wetlands, could be counted as a part of a planned development. I didn't feel as though that was appropriate, but council accepted the staff's recommendation. That change was made by the city council based upon staff's recommendation. I do have to observe in fairness that I look at this partly in mind of the tree ordinances we have considered. This is an extremely unique piece of property. I haven't seen 70-inch oak trees and 60-some inch oak trees, 48-inch oak trees, etc. So many on one piece of property. I think this is a very unique piece of property in the city of Titusville. But if you look at it, we have, there's a total of 79.38 acres. Subtracting the wetlands from that, that leaves 42.61 acres of uplands. By the drawing or diagram, I just adding up the tree preservation recreation area as well as the buffer area, that represents 16.82 acres. I know the applicant had a little bit different numbers in his response, but that represents about 39% of the uplands as being preserved. And the city's goal by the TEC as far as preservation of trees was 37.5%. So the applicant was correct in the sense this is a unique piece of property, and this has a lot of preservation on it, and it has so many trees. There's a destruction of so many trees. So it's a very unique piece of property as such. Compared to the original project, this is far superior as far as the number of lots. I recently attended a webinar put on by 1,000 Friends of Florida, which obviously we know where they stand on preservation. And they were talking about what the population of Florida was going to be in 2070. I don't think I'll see that, but in any event, it's going to be a lot, and more than likely they're coming. 1,000 Friends of Florida are encouraging, I don't know that I agree with it, but are encouraging preserving and wetlands and conservation lands. And if the population is going someplace, concentrate them in a smaller area. And that clearly means smaller lots, smaller buildings, and preserving wetlands, preserving uplands and trees and vegetation around the housing development. So that's what 1,000 Friends Florida, that's the message I got from where they see Florida and how to protect the environment as much as you can. So I'm rambling. I see no light. Well, there's Joe's lights. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd just like to add to that a bit. You know, this is my second term on planning and zoning. My first one was back in the 80s. And this is one of the best site plans I've seen. It's not perfect. I agree with a lot of things Lori Thompson and Mrs. Haynon said. But there's things like the, I called it a critter covert that you've got, where wildlife can pass underneath the roadway. And I think as many things that aren't perfect in this, we could use this as an example for other developments to follow. We've seen a lot of developments in the last 2 years that, compared to this, are atrocious. So it's not perfect, but I'll vote to approve it, recommend approval.
Is that a motion?
Well, let's hear what everybody says.
Member Murray?
I have, what I've stated earlier, a few concerns. When we do move this forward to a motion, I'd love to see a condition, as we discussed, added in regard to the narrow road, should it be approved, that it is parking only on one side. I have strong concerns, not that they need to be conditions, in regard to, again, the statement about sewage and the existing infrastructure, and attaching to that very old infrastructure and the impact. My biggest concern is actually transportation, and making sure that we clearly understand, living and dealing with Park Avenue today, it's getting busier and busier and faster and faster. Regularly, when out walking the dog, I'm sure people are moving 50, 60, 70 miles an hour on a 35-mile-an-hour road. So that situation with transportation, in particular with the school, is a concern of mine. But again, not a condition, because that we're too early in the process for that. So road width, transportation, making sure that infrastructure are concerns. But like I mentioned, I'd love to see the condition that we start looking at these narrower roads, which will become more common with low-impact development, and making suggestions on parking. We have smaller front yards. We have driveways that really only accommodate 2 cars. People are going to be parking on those streets. So how best do we acknowledge that and then minimize the risk associated with traffic patterns?
Member Spadell?
I echo Ms. Murray's concern concerning roadways, but I'd like to add that there is no traffic, that the closest traffic study is South Street, and I think that's a little far away. I don't know, I think it's more than 1.25 miles away. And I'm not sure it's comparable. I think it's an awful lot of cars could be flowing into an area that can't handle that much traffic. I am still concerned about the roadway crossing the wetlands. And I'm also concerned about storm drainage. I'm not so sure that, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but there's already current complaint in that area about flooding. And to add a roadway across the wetlands concerns me. I think the concern for trees is so ripe, and it has to be. I do think that these lots could be larger. I understand low impact, to reduce the size and to get as many houses as possible, but I think it's with the destruction of the most valuable thing that we have, which is our trees and our wetlands.
Okay, anyone else? Not seeing anyone. Anyone, any further discussion? Do we have a motion on the item? Member Murray?
I make a motion that we recommend to the city council that they approve this REZ number 2/2020 Huntington Park with one condition, that the parking on the roads is restricted to a single side using odd and even approach.
Do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Discussion on the motion.
What was the condition again?
Parking on the road is restricted to one side using the odd and even approach.
Any further discussion? At this stage, I'll probably be voting in favor of the motion. I would like to express that a concern or suggestion to staff and the applicant that they go ahead and proceed with further review of landscaping, the retention, and the compensatory storage areas. I believe that additional trees can be planted in there without, and my understanding of St. John's and DEP, they are encouraging and wanting people to do low-impact development. And I think that needs to be looked at. There seems, in my mind, a resistance by some individuals to embark upon that new journey. And I think the city as well needs to embark on that journey more so. In addition, I express a concern about potential blockage of the road across the wetlands, and from a public safety standpoint, I think the fire chief honestly needs to look at that again, because this is a unique, I think there's about 50 units over there on the far side. And if that's blocked, how in the world are they going to get in and out? So I have a very significant public safety concern about that. Is there any further discussion? Member Murray, your light's on.
I was going to ask, are you asking for us to identify concerns for the city council?
Yeah, I hope it's in the record that I'm expressed those concerns.
So just in the record, you're not concerned that we need to address it further from that?
If you want to include it in the motion, you made the motion.
Well, I'm just trying to identify, we talked prior about making it clear concerns.
We'll talk later.
We'll talk about that, but making concerns clear versus expecting them to read the record. So I wasn't sure if you had 4 concerns that you wanted addressed along with this motion.
I just would like it in the record and passed on to council that I expressed those concerns, even though perhaps I may vote in favor of the motion. Not seeing any other, a roll call.
Secretary Spidel? Yes. Member Porter?
Yes.
Member Murray?
Yes.
Member Parrish?
No.
Member Grant?
No.
Vice Chairman Richardson?
Yes.
Chairman Severs?
Yes. And for the record, the previous concerns I identify, I voted in favor of it, but I still have the public safety concerns and the desire to have a landscape plan or a plan for the retention areas, and I would use as That can be a requirement of section 6.1.8 of the technical manual as such. Member Parrish, if you'd like to, for the record.
Sure, be happy to.
Okay.
I think the project as proposed fails to protect the safety and welfare of the public. I think the roads are inadequate in terms of egress and size. I think the stormwater system proposed will fail to address the city's continuing and worsening stormwater system problems. I think the traffic information is inadequate to support additional traffic for that project. I think the public cost to maintain the infrastructure passes to the city in terms of the lift station and the lines, and I don't believe the city has the current resources to maintain any more sewage problems, and I think they've demonstrated that most recently in a horrendous manner. Finally, I think the project unnecessarily impacts the wetlands adversely, and that it could be cured by other means. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Grant? You wanna
I
take the
agree
record?
100% with Member Parrish.
Okay. Any other comments anyone else want to make on it? Oh, then, the next item, staff, is there, it's the sketch plat, which is completely based upon what we've just heard. Is there anything you want to add as far as on the sketch plat? Does any member of the public have anything new that you want to add on the sketch plat? Yes, sir. Just want to give you a chance.
Again, Mr. Cunningham, I understand that the one-lane wide access, emergency access or egress out of the area is not approved. I would ask the Mr. Moyer to consider a access to the walking path that he's already planning around his property, but just provide a 5-foot wide area between two lots for the school children to be able to access from this Huntington Park to Falcon's Roost. That is all. Thank you.
Nothing new. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm trying to formulate my thought. Would you build a subdivision in Yosemite Valley? This is Titusville's Yosemite Valley. That's how I consider it. These huge trees need our protection, need your protection. This beautiful land needs your protection. This is the heritage for your children. The 72-inch trees, these wetlands, the aquifers. This is our legacy. It deserves our protection, just like Yosemite Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, when we're reviewing an application where the land use and zoning is already set, and our professional staff is telling us it meets all the requirements of the code, under a quasi-judicial proceeding, it's very difficult, and correct me wrong if I'm wrong, attorney, to deny the request if they meet the objective requirements of the code. I thought this was wrong in the beginning, but once we're backed in the corner as approved by the city council, then we're dealt that hand. We have to deal with the best that we can deal with it. Member Murray.
I just wanted to go through the concerns briefly again, just to make sure that we're addressing them, and ask Mr. Moya one question. Mr. Moyer, did you hear the request by Mr. Cunningham in regard to review of whether or not there was a way to attach pedestrian traffic between the two projects?
Personally, I don't see a problem with that. I can get that verified with the developer, but if you look at our plan, we were proposing a trail along the west edge. So to make a connection to the west would be fairly simple. Whether the property to the west does the same, then that would be up to them, but I don't see why we couldn't do that. I mean, we already have a trail paralleling that property line, like 5 feet off the property line, so they could almost hop on it without connection, but if that's something that you feel strongly about, then I will definitely present that to the applicant, and we can propose that to staff if that's equitable.
Thank you, sir. And member,
I just wanted to go through those
Oh,
concerns.
okay.
I'm sorry.
sorry.
I kind of got waylaid there. Didn't know if we needed to make it part of the concerns. And just for the general public here, we attempt to communicate to the city council concerns and be a little more clear about it. So the first concern was public safety, which I believe is the ingress egress issue. Is that correct?
Correct.
The second was the need for a landscape plan based on 6.1.8 of the technical manual.
Correct.
The third is stormwater concerns in regard to stormwater retention and the existing stormwater and sewer systems that they're attaching to. Correct? And then the fourth would be the potential addition of a walking path connected between the two developments. Did I miss any concerns? That's it.
I don't think so. Vice Chair. Not now. It was earlier. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You still have a motion on the table with a condition. It sounded like there is, if you're asking for Mr. Moya to consider putting in a pedestrian pathway that connects to an adjacent property, I think the best way for that to happen is that you would make that a condition, because otherwise, if they're not able to do that, or not, there's nothing that would ask us to do that, in other words, without that condition. And it could be tailored in a way that is as feasible. And then when you receive the review of the adjacent development, the sketch plat, you can consider whether that connection can actually be possible with that review. But I would ask if you are going to ask Mr. Moya to consider speaking with staff to make a pedestrian pathway between this development and an adjacent one, that it would be a condition of approval.
Chairman, can that be added to the next motion? Can it be added
Right.
as a condition to
We're
the
now at
sketch
the
plat?
stage of recommending approval or denial of the sketch plat.
Okay.
If you want to incorporate that in your motion, you're welcome to do so.
So I'd
Sorry.
like to make a motion that Huntington Park sketch plat be approved with one condition, and that is the addition of a pedestrian path between Huntington Park and the Falcon Roost division that will be next to it, based on feasibility.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a second to the motion. Any discussion on the motion?
Is staff, I need a staff question or an attorney question.
You have a question?
Can we have that kind of a stipulation? The other Roost property is private property. How can you tie this two things together with a consent?
We do that all the time. Right now, we have requirements in our code that would require two adjacent retail developments to connect in some way.
Okay.
Provided it's feasible, of course. But we have that.
And what's the term, provided it's feasible?
Well, as long as it could be there isn't an impediment there, like there's a pond between both
Okay,
developments, maybe.
okay.
That might not be reasonable to ask.
Okay, okay.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, have the roll call on the motion.
Member Grant?
No.
Secretary Spidel? Member Murray?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Richardson?
Yes.
Member Porter?
Yes.
Member Parrish? Chairman Severs?
Yes, with the concerns previously mentioned on the rezoning. So the motion passed. Member Parrish, your concerns are as previously stated?
Yes, they are. And the fact that this parcel can be developed. This parcel can easily be developed. It may not be developed before the adjacent property, but all of these concerns with regard to the wetland and the trees, to me, they could be resolved by simply letting one side of this property be developed and then the second side get developed as the other side gets developed. This property could never have all the lots that it might have wanted at one point in time. It just environmentally can't happen. And so to me, the smartest thing to do is to do it in a logical timeline where the part that can be developed gets developed, and then as the western portion gets developed, we attach to that portion and develop the rest. The wetlands don't need to be impacted.
Thank you for your concerns. Vice Chair. Okay, any further? I think we have taken action on on those items, and now we're to petitions and requests from the public. Do we have any petitions?
Here's that first before we added that to the agenda. Or you want that under?
Reports. Reports. I don't see any petitions or requests from the public. Next, staff report.
The only thing I wanted to report is that you will have a meeting with several ordinances in consideration at your next meeting, plus conditional use permits. So you have a full agenda at your next meeting. If you could please tell our secretary whether you're able to attend the next meeting so that we can make sure we have a quorum for that night. I don't have anything more to add other than the 2040 comprehensive plan presentation that I gave to you several months ago is scheduled to go before City Council on the 26th at 5:30. So we will make a presentation on what you recommended approval of for that night. And we'll ask them for direction as to whether to go forward with it as is, as for transmittal to the state and get that process going, or we'll find out what direction specifically council will give us.
And so if we want a copy of the revised plan, we can secure that?
Yeah, I didn't make too many changes since the last time I brought this before you, but as soon as that's done, I can definitely copy you on that, especially when that agenda is published. And the presentation, if you like as well.
Well, obviously what I'm trying to find out, if we made 20 suggestions, and I think it was a lot of individuals on this commission thought those were going to be incorporated. If half or three-fourths of them are not, I think we would like to see it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what we're going to present to City Council is what you recommended based on what we gave you. So in other words, we're going to give them the same comprehensive plan draft that you saw, plus the red line strike through changes that we proposed based on the questions you had. And then we're also going to explain some of the suggestions you had at that meeting.
Okay,
And ask council how they would like to go forward with that.
okay, thank you. I misunderstood. All right, anything else from staff?
I do want to mention, Mr. Richardson, that we did not add the agenda item that you requested about the communication between P&Z staff and council on tonight's agenda, mainly because I just forgot. And we were just in a rush to try and get this agenda out to you when we needed to publish it between Christmas and New Year's, and a lot of the staff members were not there in the office. That said, after it was published, we decided not to republish it or change it because we thought that the agenda item of discussion could be handled under chairman's report or member's report somewhere on the current agenda. If there's something specifically you'd like us to present to you as far as an agenda item or attach information that needs to be included with that agenda item, that would probably prompt us to have added this on there as a separate item with an attachment to it. But we just didn't have any specific information that was requested of us. So that's the main reason why it wasn't added on tonight's agenda.
Well, I've advised the vice chair that he can bring it up under his report, and I know others were interested in it as well, and we will have members' reports very shortly. City Attorney, is there any item you have?
Not that I can think of.
The next item is chairperson's report. The only thing I would like to mention, like all of us, we've been following the concerns with the spill of the sewage system. I have to look at the our December 2nd minutes. Member Parrish said the CIE plan is not adequate in addressing the concerns and issues of the water lines and sewer lines that need to be replaced, that are not associated with new growth. Member Parrish said these are critical areas that need to be addressed, and the funds available are not nearly enough to make these improvements. You must have known what was going on, Member Parrish, because unfortunately something happened.
This isn't the first time this has happened.
Believe me, I'm well aware of that.
Well, it's not the first time. And if you saw the dead fish and then you saw the vultures, you thought it was like a Hitchcock movie out there. And the truth is, I can laugh about it because I don't want to cry about it. This is something the city's going to have to address. It's stormwater, it's sewer lines, everything. If you go outside of the city to seek a grant or to seek a foundation support to correct this stuff, they're not going to be real sympathetic when the city has to admit the decisions we've made over the last 30 years have contributed to this problem. We have to do a better job with stormwater. We have to do a better job at maintaining our infrastructure. Or we might as well just drop the nature part from our gateway, because we'll be a gateway to space, but we'll be a gateway to also a stinky lagoon and a problem that most people here don't want to address. When I grew up, people complained because the river smelled bad. It smelled bad because it was healthy. There were grasses that would wash up and then decay on the shore. I wish I had that again. I'd rather see that than the foam and the, you know what, that we see now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I wasn't prophetic. I was just trying to be factual. And I was trying to get people to start thinking about this stuff. We can't delay it anymore. Or if you want to, that's okay too. Just admit it. Don't be hypocritical about it. Because we can't clean up the lagoon until we take care of these problems.
Would you like to comment,
Yeah.
sir? Go
If
ahead,
it's
sir.
my report time.
That's your report time.
The reason I wanted to add this to the agenda was because I'll give you two examples. That's one of them. When we discussed the comp plan and the capital improvements portion of the comp plan, we had some questions. At least four of us had various questions that could not be answered. There was no public works director, no utilities director present at the meeting. So basically, we were asked to rubber stamp something when it came up before council. When it came up before council, we had voted to reject the item. Council and the staff acted like, well, it's in the budget. You know, we've planned this utilities expansion. Well, this is the local planning agency. We're not a utilities board or a finance board. And the council voted to approve those changes where we asked them to deny it. The second thing was when the home occupations came up before council, we had 4 or 5 concerns. Mrs. Murray, I think you made them. And council was told that we only cared about 1 hours of operation, and the other concerns came under that and revolved around hours of operation. They didn't even talk about them. And so I was pretty mad, especially after the sewer leak. And I had a discussion with Vice Mayor Nelson. And she had a meeting, I think you were there, Chelsea, where it came up, the subject of the P&Z came up. It was not the reason for the meeting. It just came up during discussion. And she expressed to me later the concerns that Peggy had about us. And I had some concerns that things weren't being relayed properly to council. So Vice Mayor Nelson and I agreed to ask Peggy to have a sit-down meeting, just the 3 of us, and discuss this in a productive way. And well, after 4 reschedulings, the meeting never came about. But, so I called the former chairman, Sean Williams, and I talked to him about what has been your P&Z's relation with the staff. And he says, it's been his experience, the P&Z has talked about that we're too mean to staff, that we're intimidating. And I would just say a lot of it comes from the frustration that our message, the conditions and the concerns we have don't get relayed to council. Pure and simple. It's like we're the Rodney Dangerfield Committee. We don't get no respect. I'm kidding, of course. But that is my concern. Maybe I watch too much council meetings on TV. I watch everyone from beginning to end. And sometimes I'm so mad, I can't sleep at night. But it's still my concern. Our concerns and our conditions are not being adequately discussed with council. Now, I realize that 3 of us come for reappointment in 2 weeks. Maybe we'll be here in a month, maybe we won't. But that is still my concern, and it will always be my concern, especially when you said, when we were discussing the comp plan amendments, you made a comment, I think it's even in the minutes, that the infrastructure was not adequately planned out, was not adequately addressed. And I just want to get anybody else's opinion of why we're not getting across the council our conditions and our concerns when we make motions. We're following exactly what you and Vice Mayor Nelson told us to do. But they're not coming across the council that way. And these 2 incidences, there's more than that. Those were the 2 most recent.
Member Parrish?
Well, first of all, we have the luxury of not having to run for election. And I think the reality is we can say a lot of things that people who are looking for votes don't say, that they might think. It's easy for me to voice my opinions because, frankly, I don't give a rat's you know what, whether anybody agrees with me or not. I try very hard to learn the issues, and I think our staff is a wonderful group of people that are trapped between elected officials and people who want to be a valuable resource to those elected officials. And the communication between the staff and council, they look to council to give them direction, to explain to them what they're looking for. We look to them to just listen, and sometimes they're trapped between a rock and a hard place because they know the political realities. I don't know that the city's gonna look for money for infrastructure, but I hope they will. But like I said, I can say all I want because I'm not going to get elected anything. And I think I've established that pretty well just in the short time I'm here. I hope City Council will keep me. But if they don't, I'm going to tell them that the learning curve to be an effective member of this group is much greater than the public realizes. You have to be willing to devote a significant amount of time and a significant amount of interest to be able to follow through with all of the issues that we get presented with. We're not engineers. We're not designers. We're not landscape people. We've learned more about trees in the last 2 months than most people learn in a lifetime.
Yeah.
I watched for the first time a 20-inch water oak get taken down, and I realized, why do they call it a water oak? If you've ever seen one cut down, it's because it just spews, literally spews water. All of that is important, and the fact that I'm willing to continue to beat my head against this rock probably says something about me that I wouldn't want to admit. But the bottom line is, I hope they'll keep me. I hope they'll keep all 3 of us. But if they don't, God bless them, they have to get elected. I don't. And these things that we consider a failure to communicate, Cool Hand Luke, what we have here is a failure to communicate. I think that it's not staff's fault. They're doing the best they can. They're trying to deal with people who have very strong personalities. We all have very strong personalities, and I think they're doing the best they can. And I think it's up to us to reach out to staff to help them get these things through to council in a better manner. And I'm willing to do it because I think they're doing the best they can and they're working hard. And I think that as Titusville grows and the amount of properties that are available for development, these issues are just going to intensify. This parcel that we looked at tonight wouldn't have been developed 30 years ago because somebody would have said, that's ridiculous, that's wetlands. We're going to go over here and buy this tract of high and dry and put all the houses we want on it. And the reality is, if we wanted to preserve this area, I'm sorry that they bought a pig in a poke, but they only had a certain amount of high and dry property there to develop. And it's not our fault. That's just the reality of what's going to get developed. There are parcels in Titusville that should never get developed because they're so low. I hope they never do. But if some guy from Oshkosh, buys it,
It's Minnesota,
I was gonna
not
say.
Wisconsin.
Not Wisconsin. Okay, but if somebody from far, far away buys that tract and doesn't know that they can't put all those houses on it, it's not my fault. And I think that if you look at the Titusville people, they know what's going on. It's not Titusville people who have been hoodwinked, so to speak. And I think staff's doing a great job. I think we just need to talk to them more and do a better job of trying to help them deal with people who want to be elected and reelected. I don't, so that's my thought.
Member Murray, you've had your light on.
I'm only offended if you think I'm from Fargo.
Actually, I have family in Fargo, so watch it.
Iowa? No. So staff's well aware of how I felt after the city council meeting in regard to the capital improvements schedule. I think I referred to, if they just want me to rubber stamp, tell me I need to rubber stamp. My frustration watching, and I talked to you in regard to, I need to quit doing that. I shouldn't sit in bed at night and watch these because then I just fume all evening long. Literally was, I took a little bit of ownership of it because I knew better. We had our communication meeting and we made it clear that we needed to articulate what our concerns were, and it got out of hand that night. And I'd had so many discussions with staff on different topics in regard to that, that I think we missed the point of coming back and being very clear. I used the term transparency, which became a big part of the discussion for the city council. I shouldn't have used that. I should have been clear on what I meant by that. I had in-depth discussions about sidewalks because of a delta of 100,000 to 800,000. And it's not that I needed to see the line item in the budget. I wanted to better understand. And I thought the community would also want to understand those deltas. As I explained in my emails after the fact, I did a data point to data point analysis from the existing comprehensive plan budget to the one that was presented in front of us. Those are characteristics of a traditional corporate environment, and if that's not why we do it here, then I need to learn my lesson. But we did not articulate. We assumed that they would watch the video or read the details. And so I take ownership in the motion. Shame on me. I'm going to go back to that initial working session we had, and that's the reason why I asked for clarification on the concerns tonight. And what is that we got to be a little clear on that. But the expectation then is those will be 4 things that are articulated verbatim to the city council. These are 4 concerned areas of concern, and our expectation is we want you to discuss it. These are the things that we think are important for you to be aware of. When Ms. Busaka discussed the word transparency and the discussion of the sidewalks, and then the people came up and talked about the budgets, and like I said, I was fuming because that was not the intention. We should have been able to and again, I take ownership of this, we should have tabled it that night and come back for further discussion. A lesson learned, because we should have been able to come back then, have presented our concerns to you, and had you come back and explain them to us. Going back to the communication meeting, I had recommended and volunteered, if nobody else wanted to do it, we need a P&Z member there so that it's not left up for somebody's interpretation. If they have a question, we should be there to answer it. I understand that they can't read 200 pages of agenda. I understand that they may not have the time to watch the video. Let's then be clear that we will be there to answer the questions for them. Peggy was not able to represent us in the manner that I would like to have seen, but again, we should be there to do it in case Peggy hasn't had a chance to be informed. But yeah, that was very, very frustrating for me. And like I said, I think everybody kind of got an email in regard to how I felt about that. And I truly, I explained I was concerned about Councilmember Jordan's kind of, this is what it was done before, this is how we're going to do it again, we're going to approve this. And if that's the way the game's played, then just tell me. We're just going to rubber stamp this. We're going to present this to you because it's part of an ordinance or statute. Even that was confusing. It wasn't even clear in the city council meeting on why was this even there. And it was different from what we were told in the meeting. It was different from what they were told in that meeting, and it was different from what I was told in the emails that came later on. Because I think I made the recommendation that if there was an ordinance that required this to come forward every year, and yet this was something only required by the state every 7 years, let's change the ordinance and get rid of it. Brad clarified for me that I had a misunderstanding of that, but that's, between our meeting and the city council meeting, that's the impression I had. So again, going back to communications, we got to be clear in these concerns. We have to be able to articulate clear conditions. And I really believe we have to have somebody at the city council meetings.
Well, in the 80s, I'm dating myself, we had to be at council meetings. The chair had to be at council meetings because I was the chair most of the time. And if I wasn't there, somebody had to be there. But then in the 70s, when I was on council, agenda packets were about 200, 250 pages. This council has agenda packets that are 800 and 900 pages. And they're given 3 days to study them. It's kind of moving too fast. In a conversation I had with Mayor Diesel, he said, "Y'all are coming up for reappointment already?" And I said, "Yeah." Because in the 80s, I think it was, Dwight, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, council's terms grew from 2 years to 3 years to 4 years.
Correct.
And no consideration was of extending terms for people on the boards and commissions. And one other thing I'll add to the conversation is that TEC thought they were going to discuss the tree ordinance at their meeting on the 13th. They saw it's not on the agenda. Staff is, again, preparing some compromise. And by the time we get through this process, we've been discussing the tree ordinance for a year. Half our term for a year. Tree ordinance could have been used tonight. I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was you, Jane, that we're taking so much time with this tree ordinance, but we can't wait for these developments. And, you know, I'm to the point, don't take me completely at my word, but maybe we should stop approving any development until both the tree ordinance is established and some kind of utilities plan, so that at least we know what to do next. Because I saw in Florida today that we have so far sucked 840,000 gallons out of the ponds at, you know, Spaceview Park and Sandpoint at this point. They were contaminated with sewage. I've had my say. I'll shut up.
Certainly, a lot can be said. I don't know how much I should say. Interesting enough, I'm the longest serving regular member on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've only been here since October 2018. The longevity on here is very short. I remember when I first came on, we were fortunate to have 4, maybe 5 members, and it was difficult. And I have to compliment the current membership as far as their dedication, willingness to serve and come to meetings and the like. Some of the latest things I've heard, and this is staff's, present company excluded, is we have too many lawyers on the Planning and Zoning Commission. We need an engineer. And I've heard that on some of those meetings, well, Dwight Severs is anti-development. In my 40 years as city attorney, I do not ever remember staff members trying to lobby for certain members on boards and commissions. I do not remember that occurring once. So whether or not I'm reappointed on the 26th, who knows? But I take this position very seriously, spend a lot of time studying and reviewing. I deliberately, after resigning from the city attorney's office, waited 5 years because I wanted to contribute something back to the community. And it is not my desire to offend anybody. I served for 50 different council members, 7 different city managers, not once ever had a motion, well, you're fired, or we're going to make a motion to fire you. I do know how to get along with people. I do respect the role of the city council. I respect that we are advisory in nature. But likewise, I think we do serve a role, and I highly respect the role of staff. But it is very important to this system to work properly that everybody respects one another. And typically it starts at the top in any organization. I respect you, you respect me, all the way up and down the chain of command, whatever you want to call it. But if you see somebody doesn't respect others, guess what happens? The morale, the getting along with people in the organization does not work very well. Whenever I first came on this board, Chairman Williams, who the vice chair mentioned, and certainly Mr. Parrish remembers, he constantly complained about the Planning and Zoning Commission not he would on occasion say, what am I doing here? Am I wasting my time because my recommendations, didn't he, Brett? Am I wasting my time? And somehow that log jam needs to be broken by somebody. And frankly, I would suggest you start at the top. And I know I've been told, well, if staff says one thing, they're the paid professionals, and we're going to accept their opinion, irregardless, in essence, of what you as Planning and Zoning Commission suggest. So somehow we need to have a better working relationship with the city manager and his staff. He has to want that. He has to want that. And I hope that is true. Certainly, I think every member on this commission want that. And let's work together. Maybe this will be kind of my farewell speech to you, because I hear others are looking for other people to be on the commission. And I find that not the proper function based upon 50 years of experience of either being an assistant or the city attorney of a city. Those who play by the sword will die by the sword. We all need to get along together. And I probably said too much. And Member Parrish, your talk reminded me of the day in 1980s as city attorney. I received this letter from the Department of Justice demanding $24 million from the city of Titusville because not meeting the requirements as far as discharge into the Indian River Lagoon. I moved to Riverside Drive, and what I observed a short time after moving there was whenever there was a heavy rain event, the lift station, who I ended up painting myself because I couldn't get anybody to come out and paint it. What I learned was when they installed the new lift station at Titusville High School, it overpowered the other lift station at Gray Street. And guess what? It wouldn't pump you know what out. And it would fill up and overflow in the river. And that persisted, despite my complaining, for 5 years. Finally, they built a new one. But there is a lot. One of the requirements of the federal government in working everything out, we had to spend $500,000 a year on fixing lines. And then mysteriously, after a while, that all went away, and we still need to be doing it to keep the system in repair, because it does fail. And my experience over time, nobody likes hearing this, is usually there's money in the budget, but you've got to have people that will do the work. Check on it. Make sure it properly functions. You got to do that. And Member Murray, do you have any comments about what I said?
Oh, no. I think it's important. Here's the challenge I have. You guys have all that level of experience you've got from 1980 and 1970. I don't have any point of reference. So I keep going back to a broken communication system we have, and how are we going to make, if we're waiting for them to tell us how we need to communicate better, I think we're going to be waiting, based on your historical information, a long time. So my question is, what are the steps that we're going to take so that the information from tonight is represented the best way possible? And we have some obstacles in front of us. We don't see our actual minutes until after the city council has seen our minutes. I understand the timeframes and the restrictions on staff, so I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying that that's a challenge for us. So then the question is, how do we make sure that those 3 concerns tonight and that one condition is understood? I do give Vice Mayor Nelson and the city attorney, as I mentioned in one of my several emails, credit for attempting to be clear about what we're trying to do in regard to the capital improvement schedule. So here we are. What do we do next week? Because they meet next week. So what's our action plan? I hope the information that you're hearing through a grapevine or a gossip chain or whatever this is about the 3 of you not being here at the following meeting is just gossip. Regardless, who's going to be there to make sure that this very important thing, which will have the same people coming and stating their concerns, that the P&Z understands why we had to come to the decisions we came to. So that they clearly understand what the concerns are about our infrastructure. And that it's not something that's breezed by. Does somebody go? Do we have to review these 4 concerns before they're put into the minutes? I'm trying to figure out an action plan here.
May I make a statement?
Sure.
So after hearing what I've heard this evening, there are 4 things I'd like to bring up, just so that you're aware of. The budget process, it sounds like you probably need to be involved in it. And it starts with a workshop, a public workshop between the city council members and the public, usually around January or February. I don't know the exact date yet, but there's usually a Saturday morning event for that. After that really kicks off everything. After that, then there are a series of meetings, internal staff and departments and the finance department to figure out what is necessary based on what council is asking for. Because after that public workshop, then council meets with the city manager to figure out what the priorities are. And then the city manager forms the budget based on council's priorities. And then there are these workshops for council to look at the final budget that the city manager is going to present, usually around August, September. And then there's a final public hearing, of course, just before the next fiscal year, which is October 1st. So we've talked about how we can give you information as that process works, and we're still thinking about how that would work out. But I would encourage you to attend maybe the public meeting or workshop. You may have to do a notice that several of you be there if that's the case. But that might be a first step to express your concerns about what should be included as part of the budget. Just so you know, the budget does include a 5-year capital improvement plan. That gets approved with the budget in late September. And then we take that, planning staff takes it and takes what is concurrency related to the comprehensive plan, put it into the CIE. And then we take everybody else's budget from other agencies and put it together, and that's what we give you in December or late November. The state statute requires it. And you get it at the very end, after the budget has been approved and everybody's discussed it all. So, yeah, I can understand why some of the commissioners were concerned about and questioning, what is this? What am I getting at this back on December 8th? And I think we were taken back because it was to us, it was such a routine thing that we've always had to present to the Planning Commission for many years, where before we had to do the same thing. It's a state requirement of every jurisdiction. So I think to help you understand what's in there, it might be better for us to maybe provide you some information at some point through the year that'll help you understand what's being presented, what's in the budget, and what it's going to pay for. And then maybe we can take that input and somehow provide that to City Council. I don't know. I'm not sure how that process will work. But that's kind of what we've been talking about internally. Kind of evaluating our process and seeing if there's something we need to provide to you in addition to what we do in December. The other thing I wanted to bring up was that I think Commissioner Parrish's comments about staff, I really appreciate your comments, and how complex the learning curve that you have to go through to figure out what your role is really. It's true, and it is incumbent upon the staff to explain these complexities to you so that you can make an informed recommendation to City Council. And it's incumbent upon staff to explain this stuff to the public as well. So we are constantly trying to find ways to better communicate the information, the complex information that we have and have to review and bring it before you and make sure that it's consistent with state law, with our local ordinances and any other requirements as well. So it is a lot of information, especially since you only meet twice a month. It's difficult to do, but we try our best, and we really appreciate the questions and calls that we get from you prior to the meeting. That really helps us, and especially helps you have a shorter night too. As far as maybe having a commissioner go to the city council member or city meeting and representing the commission, I think just from past experience of some other commissioners doing that, and I think the TEC, there was one experience where it was asked if the commissioner was there representing the TEC or not. I think that if you would have to make a vote, I would recommend that you make a vote as to who on your commission would represent you, so that when that person goes to the city council, that you can state that you are there on behalf to represent and communicate on behalf of the commission. I think if that was that should be really clear. The fourth thing too I wanted to bring up is that, and I'm sure some of you know this already, I'm sure we've already explained this to you, is that we've tried our best, we are trying our best to convey the concerns, comments, and conditions throughout this night to the city council, but understand the amount of time city council has to digest a lot of this information, in addition to everything else they do. So we provide draft minutes. We try to have several people review it before it goes out with links to the segments of the video of tonight's meeting, so council members can go to that particular portion of the meeting and not, maybe some of them might not have time to review or watch the entire meeting. We try to have meetings with individual council members to try to explain what happened. We try to make sure we work with you to make sure that the conditions are very clear so that council can take that information and understand exactly what the motion was. The minutes are longer than when they used to be, so we do take a lot more time, and Lori spends an enormous amount of time trying to make sure she gets conveys the right information inside those minutes, that in the meaning that you wanted inside those written summaries. But that's what they are. They're not verbatim records. They're summaries. And so we do have to make some judgment calls sometimes, even in those minutes. With that, I mean, I'm not sure what else we can provide as far as communication. We are here. We are willing to have a meeting with you virtually, in person, on the phone. Please take advantage of it. We'd love to speak with you, especially before the meetings. It's really helpful. As far as how we can communicate better or provide information to the city council, we're open to any suggestions beyond what we've already done so far.
Just for a point of clarification, when I talked about things being verbatim, it is in regard to a condition or a concern. Yeah. If we were to do...
Condition, because a concern, again, is a summary inside those minutes. So without watching the video and seeing exactly what was said or reading a verbatim record, your concerns are summarized inside the minutes and then summarized inside the recommendations or whatever is presented to city council. Because otherwise, let me give you an example. A set of minutes.
Can I just finish my thought process quick, because it might answer where you're going? In our workshop, understanding the size of the information, the videos, the whole 9 yards, our expectation was, I thought, that we would articulate 4 areas that we were concerned about, that would potentially either get them to look deeper into it, or that they would have their own discussions about it. In doing so, that at the time the P and Z recommendation would be made, it would be that there was a motion made. This was the approval of that motion. And here are 4 concerns, and that they would be articulated. Not yet have concerns been articulated in the meeting. I get it that they're written down someplace, but it was supposed to be that audio cue that there's something deeper here.
Right. Unfortunately, if you have a motion and there's some conditions or explanation as part of that motion, the written motion itself, we need to convey verbatim to City Council as much as possible.
Yeah.
Additional concerns is discussion. And we can try and what you're asking us is, are you calling out after the motion has been approved? We have additional concerns. Okay, now we need to make that verbatim, or is that part of the original discussion as part of, that'll be summarized in the minutes? I think now we got 3 sets of type of information now we get to City Council. You have the verbatim motion, or you have summarized discussion, which is the minutes. But I think what you're asking for is something additional to that, that is verbatim, that spells out your concerns. Now, each time we've done that, we've had several people discuss, and it turns, and we don't know how else to treat it other than just part of your regular discussion and your minutes. So we
Hence-
provide that to City Council.
And in the original meeting, I brought it to this point, and I did it again tonight. If we are to have concerns, that we are clear. That's why I went back and said, Chairman Severs, did I get these concerns correct? Are these the concerns?
And that was very helpful, yes. And so we will
that's
try
my
to.
expectation is
Yeah.
that we would be very clear on what the concerns are and not, I get it, we jabber on and it goes back and forth and it's confusing as heck to me sometimes. I'm not asking for that. I'm just trying to, so in the world that I come from, we would get detailed, technical, IT and engineering reports, just tons of information. But on top of that, we would get an executive report, often in just bullet points that says, by the way, here are the highlights that you have to care about. And those highlights I had to care about, I then would either put off to staff or I would read myself so that I better understood it. I don't expect them.
Remember, Murray, let me let the vice chair, he was, light was on before yours, but let him speak.
Well, I have just a couple of quick things to discuss. Don't get me wrong. I respect the staff. I think you're doing a great job, but I think everybody is under pressure. The staff is under pressure. P&Z is under pressure. The council's under pressure. We're going about things too fast. You know, if you consider how many hours council has to devote to the agenda, that's about, the way I figured it out, it's 10 pages per hour, not counting sleep time, if they really read the agenda. And I'm only aware of one councilman that is able to read everything on the agenda. The second thing I want to say is I've known Dwight since 1977.
Oh.
When he swore me in as the youngest city councilman. And there are times when council fought like dogs and cats. But every single of those 50 councilmen respected you, Dwight. And you forgot to add one thing. I think on 2 occasions you were acting city manager, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
I hope all 3 of us are reappointed, and I hope we get 4-year terms. The council decides to give us 4-year terms instead of 2.
I just want to say, staff, I think you're doing everything you can do as far as the minutes, and you have verbatim there exactly where you can find it in the tape recording of the meeting where council members can look at. One of your suggestions was, and personally, I think we should offer it, starting in the month of November, that we will designate one Planning and Zoning Commission member to appear before council and answer any questions, issues they have, and we will make that available. And if they say no, they say no. And I think we should do that because the other system hasn't seemed to work, despite all your good efforts. You've tried. It doesn't seem to work. And we don't have to decide that since I'm suggesting in February. And but it's just a thought, and that's one of the 4 items you mentioned as alternative ideas. And I just want to compliment our planner here today and your excellent report. You did a very thorough job and itemized each item, and that's obviously the way. Unfortunately, my training as a lawyer tells me that's what I look for, and you lay it right out, and that's a good thing in my mind. So I appreciate that. Okay. Your light's not on. Are you finished with your report? Okay. Anyone else who would like to make a report? Seeing none? Seeing none? The meeting's adjourned. Yes, Attorney.
If there was mention of someone showing up as a speaker at the meeting, I know that was discussed, but you do have to make a motion to have a designated speaker.
Right, I understand. Yeah, we'll consider that another meeting. I wouldn't know who's showing up, right?